First item on the agenda is a public comment session. JD's here. Do you have anything you want to say?
Don't really have anything we want to say, we just want to get here,
Okay.
what direction things are going.
Okay, when we get later on, you'll be free to answer questions or ask questions, so we'll reserve that till later. Until then, you have to sit through the boring part of our meetings. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. All of you have had a chance, I hope, to go through the minutes. Are there any, and this is from the board meeting, November the 8th. Are there any questions or changes that anyone would like to make? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. We also have the minutes from the workshop that were in your packets. Everyone read those. I'd like to once again say, are there any questions or suggested changes to those minutes? Hearing none, those minutes are also approved. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the audits. And we have Joe Brown and Jim
Boer.
here to conduct those for us. To give us those reports.
First of all, I just want to thank the board for allowing us to be of service. We really appreciate it. You really have a fine organization here. You've got a great management team. They do a great job. And I'm happy to say that we didn't have any issues this year. There was no required adjustments, which is very complimentary of your staff that they do a great job here, not to make any adjustments. Every year is always clean when we get here, and that sure helps our audit. I'm sure y'all have probably had a chance to look at your financial statements. I'm going to just make a couple comments here, if you bear with me just a minute. First of all, if y'all look at the electric department, and if you got your statements in front of you, that page 5 there, that's a pretty good place to look at as far as management discussion and analysis. That's a good comparative to look at from between 18 and 17. And, as you can see, looking at that, you had another good year this year compared to last year. Both this year and last year look very good. There's not a lot of changes this year. The only thing that y'all did do in the electric department was you did borrow a little bit of money this year, but that's about the only difference from last year. All the financial statements are pretty much the same as last year. The footnotes, obviously, there's a bunch of those. I'm not going to make you go through listening to me talk about the footnotes tonight. You can read those later. If there's any questions, you can ask us, and we'll try to answer that. If you look at the, also on the same page of the Water and Sewer Department, page 5, that's where the MD&A or Management Discussion and Analysis is for the Water and Sewer Department. And you'll see there that you had another increase in net position compared to the prior year, actually a little bit better than last year. Here again, not a lot of changes there. Pretty much things were comparable. There's no debt in the Water and Sewer Department, which is really commendable. That's unusual for Water and Sewer Departments not to have any debt. So y'all have done a really great job in doing that. I don't know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. We did give it, like I say, a clean opinion on both the electric and Water and Sewer Department, which means that everything is fairly presented from a financial standpoint. But if anybody does have any questions about the electric or the Water and Sewer Departments, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Did you see any areas of concern, anything that we should?
No, sir, we did not. Everything was good. It was good shape. Like I say, you guys have a really good staff here. The management team does a great job in maintaining the financial records and making good management decisions.
If there are no questions or comments, I'll ask for a motion to approve the audits.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The audits are approved. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Joe.
Jim Burr's going to go ahead and go over the audit for the pension
Pension,
plan.
okay.
A little bit briefer than he was.
That's hard
But
to do.
In addition to providing the audits for the two utility departments, we also audit the pension plan for the employees of the utilities. And so this was the audit for the same fiscal year ended June 30, 2018. And just some highlights from that audit report is that the return on investments for the year was about 8.74%. The plan's net position, that's the increase in its equity, increased $1.7 million. That's attributable to high employer contributions into the plan as well as return on investments that exceed distributions from the plan. The employer contribution has been and continues to be higher than the required contribution. Management is trying to get this plan well-funded and is doing a good job of doing so with the additional contributions. The fiduciary net position, that is basically the net assets in the plan, represents 71% of the projected plan liability that you would ever have to pay to all the employees as of this date. So that's a very high funding level. That's really all I want to address about it, but if there's any questions related to the plan or the audit, we had this similar experience with management. We were in and out very quickly due to their efficiency.
What are the targets for the pension liability? We're at 71% now.
Well, I don't know that there's really a target. The higher, the better. But I would say that
what
on
level would-
average,
Oh,
they're less than 50%.
okay. And the present value of the benefits, what's a norm there?
The present value, probably about the same. I'd say that's a little bit of a different, as looking at it from a different perspective. That generally is higher than the 50%, so I'd say 60, maybe ballpark. And that's a very much of a broad average because there's several plans in the United States that are well below those amounts.
Just heard about Chicago
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Because I love the expression you used, trying to get the plan well-funded. I would submit the plan is well-funded, and we are increasing what we do to keep it well-funded.
I would concur with that statement. That's what I intended to say.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
If there are no more questions or comments, again, I would ask for a motion that we approve the pension fund audit report.
Make that motion.
Second? Anyone?
Second it.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Pension fund audit report is approved as presented. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas to you guys.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the vouchers. Again, everyone has had a copy in their online and in hard copy. Are there any comments or questions about the vouchers? Hearing none, we will approve the vouchers, reports as presented. And moving on to the monthly reports, start with the financial reports. Dudley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you got the revenue expense summary for the month, for the fiscal year through the month of October 2018. We had a pretty solid month in the electric department with a net income of $331,000. The water department had a net loss of $118,000. We'll talk about that in a second. The year-to-date numbers, the electric department is $768,000 ahead of the forecast on their net income. That's always a good thing, but as I always say, that can vanish real hurry with a bad winter. So We did have a good solid summer.
Or a good winter.
With a, with a lot of heat, but you let the ice storms roll in there and that's gone. So, we're optimistic though, we love that. So, as far as the water department, our net loss of $118,000, we closed a work order, we had a SSES study, which is Sewer System Evaluation Study, is that right, Dan? Survey, and we had a lot of that budget, 55 budgeted for last fiscal year and 55 for this year, and it kind of started late, so most of the costs rolled into this fiscal year. And we just, unfortunately, there's nothing there to capitalize on. It's just a survey that tells Dan where there's inflow and infiltration and things like that, and then we start capital projects based on that. Am I saying that correct?
good.
So unfortunately, we had to expense all that, and that's gonna throw us well behind the forecast of $141,000 behind the forecast, but it is what it is, and we just have to deal with that, so. That's really all I've got. I mean, the sales are just slightly behind what we forecasted, 9,000 in the water and 12,000 in the sewer. But with that $106,000 work order hitting to all expense, that's $135,000 behind the forecast. So the other big thing we have is our pumping in the sewer. That's really high, and I talked to Dan about that last month, and he talked about these. What you call those disposable wipe things are such a problem for us. Personal wipes, yep. And because they clog up our lift stations and we have to go clean them out, and it's a real issue according to my expert sitting beside me here. So that's really driving the pump maintenance cost up more than what we hoped, because those are becoming more and more popular.
Is there any concern for the fiscal year? I know we're
Yeah,
behind right now.
the state is, they have changed their rules. You know, before, if you had a net income in the black, you were good. But they allowed you to count this capital contributions, which is what we've been doing, and now they're saying you can't count that anymore. But I talked with the state myself on that, and the concern is that's going to raise a flag with them that you're in the red. But I talked with them about that because we have zero debt and a lot of cash. So we're really fiscally sound. We just don't have a net income. And he said, yeah, he said, I get that, but he says, and we'll consider all that when that comes up. But that's something we're going to have to look at in the future, I think, is trying to get that number in the black before capital contributions. That's some area we're going to have to study.
And we have, 2 years? You can go 2 years? in the
They're
red?
going to flag us this year, I believe. So I didn't realize it till the auditors were telling us that, you know, they changed the rules on that. And I go, uh-oh, but
It's really not an
It-
uh-oh.
it-
It's more of a, because under anybody's measurement, we are financially very sound. What's got us is the depreciation, because we have so much depreciation, that drops us into this net loss position. So what the flag comes is, we're gonna, they'll look for an explanation. Given that explanation, and especially, as I've told you before, I'm planning to do a comprehensive rate evaluation based on ACWA's raising their wholesale cost to us and what we're doing up towards the interstate. So combined with our financial stability and our, what I will be certain to be recommending adjustments to reflect these additional costs, and how do we pass through those to the end user that's affected by it, I don't anticipate any problem at all.
that's just a method that the state uses to flag, to look deeper. And what he told me is, when we look deeper and we see that you have cash, and actually, even though we were in the red last year, our cash grew. It didn't go down, it grew. So when they see that kind of thing, they're not overly concerned, but he said they changed the rules because you had a lot of utilities that were in trouble, had a lot of debt, no cash, and they were using that as a way of justifying not raising the rates, and they were about to go under, and that's why they changed the rule.
Dudley, it's sort of fortuitous, I guess the training class I went to today was on just exactly this. And the guy that taught it was talking about a couple of utilities that had gone to an accounting scheme where they did not use depreciation as an expense. And
Wow,
took it out and all their problems went away.
that would work.
Yeah. And
That was a
apparently-
district, not a municipal. Not knowing anything, I'll tell you that right there.
Well, it was the city of Burgonsville and something else up in that area.
That would work, but that's a scheme, as you say. You
Well,
know?
apparently it's an approved accounting method though, and the state does it on roads, they said.
Just
they-
expense everything right
They
off
would
the
have a
top.
problem with that, I believe. They would have, but we will use that argument to justify why we're there, that we're not a distressed utility. But as far as the flag, it's gonna raise a flag. I'm gonna have to talk to them. I feel certain of that, so.
It
But
should
I'm
be a
not-
flag.
I'm not worried about it.
We're not disputing that it should not be a flag.
Right.
It should, because they need to look at the next page because it's about protecting the ratepayer. What happens is that utilities, there are competing, I guess, allegiances. And the end user, which is the ratepayer, is the allegiance that a utility should have. If there are other cross goals with other folks that would say, we don't need to have a rate that will fund the maintenance, replacement, and operations of our business because that affects me, or we have certain, we've implemented certain practices that would distress our cash, then they need to say, you don't have a rate structure sufficient to cover these costs. Because rates are politically oftentimes the last measure to fund a revenue stream. And I've told you about, what I've read in the paper about our friends in Oak Ridge, some on their city council, since the water and wastewater falls in under the city council, they're saying that they won't raise the rates under any condition, and the state hit them, and what they do is they borrow money. That's why there's $70 million in debt. We can do a lot if we never have to pay Visa, you see, because we can charge everything. As long as we don't have to pay the bill, we're going to be in great shape, and that's what happens, and that's what happened to them. The state has eventually stepped in and say, no, you're going to have to do something different, and they have.
Okay, thank you, Dudley. Move on to the project status reports. Start with the electric. Ernie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have three major projects that we're tracking for you right now on your electric status report. We're continuing our work in Norris, a little over halfway finished with that. Scheduled completion early this summer, still on track. Work downtown here in Clinton off West Broad Street. That's progressing nicely as well. We're showing that 40% complete. Keep in mind that we have spent money down there, even though there's a zero. There's just a timing factor in when the time is actually charged and accounted for. I don't see any reason why that project is not on budget, and I know it's on time. That's a fact. And the Cross Mountain job, despite the weather, has gone very well. Many praises to the foreman who's been leading that crew, Daniel Moody, and the work that they've done. Thanks to Red Simons and his sons who have worked with us as a contractor to help with getting the poles up that mountain and to the final locations where they have to be set. That is just very tedious, difficult work in that terrain.
Ray used to work here. Years
did.
and years and years when I first came here. And for over 40 years, he has worked with this utility. Anything we've got anything to do in the mountains, we call Red. And they just, he and his son is helping him a lot. They've been just terrific for this utility.
Nobody else would be willing to take their equipment up there, or much less give us the preferential rates that they do, and except, of course, JD, he'd probably do it for free. But anyway, Cross Mountain's going well, and we only have a few more days of work, and that should be complete next month. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. Dan, you want to do the?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got two projects we're tracking. These are both large pump station upgrade projects. The one in Eagle Bend is nearing completion. I'd say within another 60 days, that project should be completed and moving to your closing report. The next project are two large pump stations in Mariner Point. The equipment has been ordered. We're waiting for the equipment to arrive. Once it does, it'll be installed, and this project will roll pretty quickly after that. Both projects are on budget and on schedule.
I know there are some of us, this is off subject a little bit, who do not fully understand the water and sewer world, and wondered if you could set up a little bit of tour for anybody on the board who would be interested in learning about pump stations.
I'll take care of that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, appreciate it. Very good. We have a few purchase orders for approval. I think those all yours, Ernie?
Yes, sir. These purchase orders, and we'll take them one at a time. These are each items in your capital outlay for this year. The first item that we'll discuss is a track-mounted excavator. Our gentlemen refer to this as a backyard machine. It's been improved a lot over the years, and now it is very cost-effective. Before, these machines were in the upwards of $200,000, and we just could not justify that. But Bobcat makes good equipment. We've had good experience with it. This particular piece of equipment will fit through most man gates in people's backyards. It's very thin, petite in terms of width, and with the right attachments, it can even set poles, which is what we're very interested in when we can't get our big trucks back to these pole locations. We bid this out with the Bobcat folks. You see the bids there. The low bidder is the recommended bidder, Bobcat of Knoxville, who we are accustomed to doing business with, and we recommend the bid be accepted of $73,567.60.
Did they all three of those bid the same machine?
Yes. And not only the machine, but the accessories as well that you see listed up there.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the sale from Bobcat of Knoxville?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, next.
The next item is 15 kV circuit breakers. These are devices that go in our electric substations. They're much more capable, more heavy-duty and robust than a typical breaker we would have out here on the line. They're made for a minimum of 30 years of service. We have 50 active breakers right now in our distribution system that serve the 30,000 customers that we have. These will go to replace the oldest existing breakers in the system. that we struggle to find parts for. And they are also equipped with the technology that we need to integrate with our Fizzler, as Greg says, system for automatic sectionalizing. So we bid this amongst 3 major manufacturers. You see the results there. We got excellent bids, and we're pleased most pleased with the ABB bid, and would recommend acceptance of $175,050 to procure 9 of these little rascals for us.
Even though those manufacturers are different, the quality is very similar.
Yes. Yes, we don't have any derating or scoring. There's no bells and whistles or smoking mirrors here. This is like apples and apples, getting similar equipment that, we can neither give credit for one being better or less than the other.
Come with a guarantee of any sort?
They come with a 5-year warranty.
How many do we have in our system?
We have 50 that are active. We also have spare breakers in most all substations because from time to time one will fail. And then your option is either to put twice the load on one or activate your spare. So for a lot of reasons, we prefer to have the high capacity spare in the station.
Do I hear a motion to approve the purchase from Yoder Sales?
Make that motion.
Second.
I second it.
All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Next.
Yes, and finally, the purchase order for 69 kV breakers. These are the breakers that go on the high voltage side of the substation, the source side or TVA side, if you will. And they are the last bastion of protection to trip to save our transformers in the event there is a fault in the station or beyond, and one of these smaller breakers fails to trip. This breaker here will shut the whole thing down. So there's a lot of relaying that we have built in to protecting each of these stations. These 3 breakers are these, there actually are 3, and 3 manufacturers are the most reputable manufacturers, GE, ABB, and Siemens. The GE breakers are made in the USA, and we do give preference to equipment made in the USA. And, even with that included, they are the best and the low bid at $97,681. That is quite a bit below what we had earmarked in our capital outlay of $165,000. Of course, keep in mind, we have installation costs that will go on top of this, but we will be substantially below our projection on this line item. So we would recommend your approval to proceed with the purchase of 3 69 kV breakers as submitted.
And how many total breakers are there on the TVA side of it?
Well, per substation, there are either 1 or 2, depending upon how the substation is configured.
Okay. So these will go to 3 different substations?
In this case, these actually go to 3 different places, yes.
Okay.
And the ABB's manufactured in the US too, Ernie?
Either the I think it's Siemens that is manufactured in.
Siemens should be Germany, shouldn't
It is, but it's assembled in Mexico. I'm trying to remember the ABB 15 kV breakers were assembled in the U.S. I think these were assembled in Mexico as well, so.
We
that
would be
makes it
happy
easy.
with any one of these 3, but everything else being equal, then
Right.
that would make a difference.
I understand from previous discussions that everything's bidded separately, but if we had, because, you all recommended Yoder for the ABB for the 15 kV. If we ended up doing purchasing both the 15 and the 69 from Yoder, would there be any kind of a discount on that?
No, ma'am, no.
So they're totally separate across the board all the way? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
No more questions? Is there a motion to accept the border sales proposal?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Sale is approved, or the purchase from Borders is approved. Last item on our agenda is the one JD is here to listen to, probably. Unless you were just interested in our audit reports and things. And this is to discuss the results of the meeting that we had, the workshop that we had with a lot of people, good attendance from developers, realtors, city, Chamber of Commerce, and some just outside people who were here out of interest. But the concern, what I think everybody agreed on, everybody is interested in, is finding ways to get more residential development in Clinton and in Anderson County. It's been a problem, an issue for a long time, and no one has really figured out a good way to address it, to deal with it, to find out why this isn't happening and what we can do to make it happen. Because Clinton and Anderson County does have so much potential, according to every consultant who comes in and looks at the situation. And now we have short-term, potentially a pretty big subdivision which could go in. And in addition, we have some people who are interested in smaller, short-term, and definitely some large, longer-term developments. So we want to address all of the recommendations that the developers have made, either through their own people or through consultants. And we know that a lot of it is how we package things, how we sell our own products, because a lot of the recommendations, a lot of the requests, we know could be met using our existing policies and pricing and everything else. So there is definitely, as in almost all problems, there are communications issues that we have to overcome. But we do want to go through, we want to address as many things as we can up front. We have JD here who's representing the big project. And we want to either show him that there is a path using what we have now, our policies, to do what they want to do, or we want to look at the recommendations made by the developers and see if we can't bend or modify our policies and procedures so that we find a way to meet the needs. So Greg sent out a letter of items to walk through where there were specific problems met. And I want to stay away from the, right now, any argumentative disagreement type things about the quality of the work that was done in making these recommendations. We just want to deal with what the recommendations are, what the issues are, and what can be done to fix those. So, as Greg laid out the problems here, we start with water and sewer. And JD doesn't have a copy of this, but there were 4 items underneath the water and sewer that we felt we could deal with. One was easements on the water lines. And the recommendation that came out of, not just Mr. Campbell, but also others, was that these need to be set at 15 feet. Greg or Dan, how do you want to?
I'll be glad to, well, first I'd like to say, it's a positive thing that we revalidate or we clarify what we do. And we appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I want you to know that we've worked really hard to try to get, to not defend, because these are not policies that any one of the staff here put in play. We work with them, and there are good reasons for that. So we have worked feverishly because we have been under a time constraint. So I appreciate my staff who have spent many hours, because we have to formulate and articulate what it is that we do, why we do it, and what recommendations we are, and what those bases are for. So it's been a comprehensive time, and we are fully embraced what we perceive that our task is what can we do to better position ourselves to do what we had hoped we had always done, and that has been a great service to the folks in our community and those that are looking to build and expand our system. So I thought with easement widths, and I'm going to tell you this because it makes a play into the hows and the whys, we do some of these blanket easements because that's issue was raised for a typical process for a developer. A lot of these have originated out in the counties that we serve. And most particularly if someone is going to develop out in the county, they have to work that through the planning board and through the county. We have, and on our website and in discussion with known developers, as much as we can be involved in the conceptual stage, in the pre-design stage, then we can offer our 100 years worth of utility experience to recommend cost-saving measures in developing water, wastewater, and electric, whether it be overhead or underground. Get us involved because we'll try to help you in that design what makes good sense. 6 weeks ago, well, not even 6 weeks, within the last 6 weeks, we had a major developer coming in. We worked with him and we all sat around the table and we helped him in the design and the pre-design because they are in the conceptual stage. They made adjustments to what their development to accommodate our recommendations, which saved them a lot of money. It all worked great, all fine. But a developer will come in on a Tuesday with a plat. And that's the first time we know that anything's going on. Here I have a plat. And not only that, I'm trying to get it down to the planning commission for them to sign off. And I understand that now I have to bring it up here for you to sign. So, and what that means is we tell them whether the services are available, or what it's going to take, and what the easements are associated with that, of how we're going to serve that. But they really want it like that afternoon. They want it right away because we are the last stop to do that. So there is a press. How quickly can we do it? We tell them 3 days, although we try to do it in less than that. But we have to do a field survey because more times than not, we find that in their design, they left off facilities, utility facilities, which have to be on the plat, and then we do this global, how do we serve? So where do we come, where does our primary come? But we don't engineer it. So any area that becomes, well, we may have to use this, or we may have to come in this way, anything like that gets what we call the blanket easement. this is what, if you gotta have something today, without us engineering this, we're gonna say, we might have to come through this way, and if we do, we need 20 feet. So that's where they get the blanket, this is our blanket policy. That's true. They'll get it if they have to have it before it's engineered. However, if after it is engineered, any place where we don't need the easements, we'll relinquish that, diminish that in size or whatever. We've done it time and time again. We continue to do that. So these are not easements for the end of time. These are only easements for when and where we need to lay out our facility. So blanket easements only come into play when it's not engineered. If it's engineered, they get exactly what we can do, and all we ask for is what we think are the minimums that we can actually perform what we need to do and the safety measures and the code that's available for that. So that's a typical process for developing. Now, when we get down to the notes that Steve did for water, it says CUB water line easements width of 20 feet is larger than the standard width of 15 feet for virtually all utilities. Well, everything is site-specific depending on the development and the plat and the lay of the land and everything. But if you want to say yes, which I'm willing to say yes, we can say yes to a 15-foot width, but the caveat is in areas where all sections of the water mains and the service lines can be accessed for necessary operations, maintenance, repairs, or replacements using available construction equipment within that 15-foot wide easement. If we can put our equipment in there to repair and replace it, we're fine with 15 feet. So, yes, can you go from 20 to 15? You bet we can, if it meets the caveat that we can get in and out of there with the equipment that we have. For the sewer,
Well, let's finish that one first. Is that what, are you,
Yeah, and here's, from a developer standpoint, one of the problems that we run into is we have to loosely lay these lots out so that we can run projections on what we can actually sell. If that changes actually how big the lots are, how much room you have to build, what size of house you can put on it, that's where that falls into place. So just taking it back down to a 15-foot easement allows us to actually put a larger home on this site.
well, weren't you made aware of that when you came and talked to us about the size in between those lots?
Yes, sir, we were made aware of that.
Which is what that's what we would do. That's why we would do that. In that discussion, then that clarity can come. But if we don't have that discussion, then we're forced to make sure that we have sufficient easement irrespective of the reality, because we don't know what the reality is when we haven't had an opportunity to engineer. But by loosely laying out what you all did, it's clear that we don't need a 20-foot easement in between the lots. And I think that was communicated at that time.
Now, from our standpoint as a developer, though, if we were looking to do this in another area, let's go to Virginia for a second, and I'm looking at a group of counties, I'm gonna go to the website, and I'm gonna find their rules that are laid out there. And if it's 20 versus 15, I'm not gonna necessarily call. So this is not being specific. You're just gonna automatically lose the development because that is larger than what the adjoining county has.
so there are other counties that have, instead of 20 as their stock answer, they have 15 as their stock answer.
Which, given this caveat, which is why it's so good, is that we can do 15 as a stock answer, given the caveat that it's site-specific, and as long as we can meet it, we're good to go, which I assume that that's what the others, and that's why we appreciate the opportunity to make this what I don't consider a policy change. It is the way it's presented, because it's always site-specific, and if that is a showstopper, we need to change that.
You change that wording right there, it becomes more enticing because less of that property is used for
And
anybody.
I would be recommending to our board that we make that change, given the caveats that we have in play.
So it's just perception,
It is purely
firsthand perception without ever looking into it.
And it, you know, people start looking at broader scopes. And a lot of people just, they will drop something off on a list because they see something like that. Oh, let's not waste our time anymore, this is all this strike.
I think it's absolutely a win-win. You know, for me, there's virtually no negative for this company that I see. And that's where it's been in play a long time, and it makes good sense to say, are we communicating the right thing? Because a lot of times, if they do come in, or if they do have a problem, as we would with anybody developing, I need this corridor here, can we do something about that? Then we'll work on how we can readdress that corridor in order to, at the end of the day, get everybody as happy as we can. But using that term, 15 feet, I have no problem with at all.
I think you've protected yourself very well in it too, by saying that's assuming we can get our equipment.
And I don't think reasonable people would say, well, I'm sorry, it's coming up like a geyser in the backyard and we can't get there because 2 buildings are like this and I can't get a backhoe through there and we're gonna bring a digging crew out to hand dig it. I don't think reasonable people will expect that from us, and we would be adverse to supporting that. But I do support moving that verbiage from 20 to 15, given the fact that we have those caveats, and that meets our goal of
Right.
of a win without a loss. You know, which
Well,
is
let's
really
not,
what
let's
we're
not do
looking for.
wins and losses here. Let's just come
Well,
up with
I
that.
think we need to be very careful, though, that we word it such that we will do everything we can to make it 15 feet. If circumstances dictate, we may have to expand it, but we don't want them to come up at the end and find out it's 20 feet now and they thought it was 15.
And the best thing, because that verbiage will be interlaced throughout everything, and that, the key to that is site-specific. You cannot set a blanket boundary. You cannot set a minimum for that without looking at the plat to determine how all that rolls down.
Yeah, I think throughout this whole thing, the perception needs to be infused that we're gonna do everything we can to drive these things to the lowest level and lowest cost.
No, well,
and
I
so-
would take exception to that phrase, the lowest level and the lowest cost, because that is contingent on a lot of things. And I don't know if that's specifically what you meant, because we wouldn't want to go to the minimums on everything, because there's safety and everything else that's a factor in that. So,
No, I just don't want them to be surprised if they think they're gonna get X and all of a
But it
sudden.
goes back to the wording,
they
like
wake
Greg
up and
had
it's
originally
Y.
said, and I'm not gonna try to restate what you said a minute ago, but you said it nicely, that it would be 15 feet if,
we can essentially get our equipment in there. That's really what it boils down to. And that's depending, and again, if a developer has an angst about a certain area, we'll try to work with them to try to alleviate that. Do you see? It's not a blanket here, how's it goes. But if you say, I'm not showing you anything, what do you need? Then, and I need an answer right now.
right,
You know, I'll say, site-specific, we'd have to look at it, you know, but 15 feet unless we can't get our equipment in there and the site prohibits us doing that.
And
Then it'll be more, or more than that, depending on where it's located. It's sitting by a stream, it's sitting by the railroad, it's sitting by a street. All of that makes a difference and how deep it is, you know, because different kinds of equipment, you get them below 8 feet, and you've got a different piece of equipment out there, and it's a bigger piece of equipment. So all of that has to be determined, and it can be in the plat. So by using the phrase 20 feet to 15 feet, I have no problem with that, because in the development of the plat will actually go down less than 15 feet in certain areas where we can. So it's not like 15 feet will become the new standard, you know, it'll be less than that if we don't need it.
But the developer can count on, it's probably gonna be 15 feet unless there's some conditions that
Unforeseen
arise.
circumstances.
Yeah, unforeseen.
Which
That would make
we
it
ought to
bigger.
be able to identify for
Can you
them.
live with that, JD?
I think that's fantastic.
Okay. Next area is,
I still have more on the sewer, because you're still talking easements, and that was on water, and I'm going from Steve's notes. So if you'd like for me to address that.
different easement.
That's right.
Sewer?
Different, yeah, we'll get,
Okay.
and electric's got easements too, but
Yeah, but-
water's got a certain set of easements, sewer's got that's a whole different deal. So from the notes that Steve made, sewer line easement width of 20 feet is larger than standard width of 15 used by most utilities. Recommend 15 feet easements and 10 feet lateral easements. Additional justifications offered. And this is from Mr. Campbell's letter. And I've got CUB will accept, as we said, a 15-foot easement in width in areas where all sections of public sanitary sewer mains, manholes, service lines can be accessed, operated, maintained, repaired, and replaced using available cleaning and/or construction equipment within that 15-foot wide. However, for mains larger than 15 inches or deeper than 8 feet, where the tops of the manholes extend above the surface of the ground by more than 1 foot, where main lines have bends of more than 15 degrees, or where mains are constructed along the rear property lines through unimproved areas, along creek beds, easements of 20 feet or wider may be required by CUB to ensure access for necessary operations, maintenance, repairs, and replacements, as well as to ensure construction of permanent structures do not preclude, in other words, can't build, you know, to where we can't get into it, or the access is limited by that. So regarding laterals, as Mr. Campbell suggested, that recommend 15-foot easements and 10 feet laterals. Laterals is defined by TDEC to be a sewer that has no common sewer discharging into it. Therefore, such a lateral is the same as a sewer main and would require the same easement. However, I think he may have misspoke. The nomenclature got confused. If Mr. Campbell is referring to what CUB considers to be a service line, the public portion of a service line is generally located within CUB's easement, beginning at the main and extending the easement to the boundary clean out of the property line. Then the service becomes private, and then from that point on, from there to the building, we don't have an easement, nor would we require an easement. So the laterals come to the property line, and then, or the service line comes to the property line, then there is no easement after that. And also in consideration of easements, to show you what we deal with, it is normally, or historically, we've laid water and sewer lines in the road. So in the road means that the property is not impacted by easements for water and sewer. But I don't know, less than 5 or 6 years ago, the city changed the policy that they wouldn't allow water and sewer lines within the roads of a development, and that put us outside the curb, and that put the necessary easements. So it's not like we're trying to deal within the regulations of folks that are outside of what we do. So you can see there's a lot more caveat, and gradually, when you get down into, you cannot make that blanket call for the width of the easement. That's the bottom line. We will work with every developer, minimize to the minimum of what we can do for easements that are going to protect us in order where we can get equipment in to change it, and a lot of these are already within the setback lines. But you can't have a 20-foot easement coming down through a property line on the inner side, on both, and say, well, that's a good idea. We wouldn't say that's a good idea, but if we have a sewer main coming down that one piece of property, when we're gonna have to have a 20-foot easement is essentially what that gets down to. If not, we don't need it. And that's what we'll always do. How could we phrase that in a better way other than using the word 15 feet on this too, which I have no problem with doing that either on the sewer, as long as we can get into it and as long as it doesn't conflict with TDEC and what the requirements, or the city or the county, how close it is to their road or anything like that. I've got no problem at all rephrasing that, repackaging that, and using the term 15 feet, because the likelihood, there's a great likelihood that we can work within that 15 feet. And there's a better likelihood that we can cut some of those down to less than 15 feet if we're not going to be in there at all.
One of the things, I think you're correct in what you said. He misstated that.
Right.
His laterals are service lines, I think what he's referring to.
Then see, then there's no problem. We don't have a problem with that.
And so then you have, the only time this is ever going to come into play, I think the 15 feet would still be fine off the back of the curb. You put the same caveat on it that says, assuming our equipment can get in, and there's not the line doesn't end up being 24 feet deep where you have to have layback. And
That's
everything
right,
else.
that's right,
That would be a special condition.
right. Which I think reasonable people would say, oh, yeah, I get you.
But when you go, if you were to have to go down a property line between two lots, I think at that point in time, you could actually limit that to 10 feet on each side.
Well, that would give us a 20-foot,
20-foot
that's our
easement.
20-foot easement.
But it only takes 10 feet.
10 off of each
from
one.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're all right now. Isn't that right now when we talk about it, that,
Well, the good thing is that the developer comes in and it becomes prohibitive for the development of the number of lots, or the cost is prohibitive. At that point in time, we could work and maybe put the sewer around those lots or around a detention area that's required and locate the sewer so that it would allow for the development of more lots.
yeah, but most of the time, we're talking 10 foot off center on either side, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but
From what I understand, the whole dispute here is the original perception of 20 feet versus 15 feet. I mean, like, I feel like we're going back and saying the same thing because it is site specific.
Right.
But it's the original perception. If we have a developer looking at coming into this area to develop, they're gonna see that 20 feet and that's gonna be an automatic turnoff.
And when we talk about, we're talking about from center, when we talk about how much off the center, that's really what we're talking about in terms of our easements and in terms of the width of the easement. If we're talking about a 20-foot easement, we're talking about 10 foot off the center on each side.
Does it make any difference for the sewer if it's a pump system versus gravity flow as far as the width?
Yeah, oh,
of the
yeah.
channel?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the low pressure system is what he's talking about. I mean, that requires a lot less, we don't, there's a lot less problem with us being
a
able
lot
to
less
dig up.
problem because it's not as deep, it's not
Right.
as large. A lot of times when we get in there and dig it up by hand, like you're talking about, like we would a small water line, but a lot of these run right alongside the road. Well, when we run into problem is like down in South Clinton, when they came in and put sewer down in South Clinton, and none of those houses had it, and the creek was running behind all the lots, and they came and ran the sewer down. The sewer's gravity sewer is gonna follow the drainage ditch as it goes down. It's in the back of everything. It's hundreds of feet from a road, and you've gotta get back in there. What if we just had easements will be site-specific, depending on our ability to operate, whatever, and take out any width? That's what I'm hearing. Why would there even be a minimum?
Well, I think, for
If
me,
that's the perception.
that's something we can talk about, but for me, if I was a developer, I want a number.
You want a
I wanna-
specific number.
Yeah, I wanna hold my hat on a number, and then it would have to be a variation in order to justify a difference on that. So
Well, we don't need 15 feet sometime.
We don't, and that's what I'm saying, we would certainly work that down. We only require what we need, and then everything else, we're good to go. But if they're thinking 20 feet is the minimum, then that is in error. It's being communicated wrong, and that can be addressed. And I would be recommending at the end that this board allow us to change that verbiage from 20 to 15 feet.
It sounds like there's so many variables involved in a lateral line, a front line, a back line. What if you had a spreadsheet that defined, okay, this is a lateral line with a low-pressure system?
Normally.
Yeah, we would normally require this much, and then still the big caveat at the end that says if we run into problems, we're going to have to do something different. But at least give them a thing they can look at and say,
Make a note of that, Dan, because I think that's a great idea. If we can design verbiage that will, I mean, that may be a bigger burden than I originally think of, but we'll look at that and we'll get back to you on that.
The policy that is up on your all's website for water, that would be the perfect place for that. If you had just a table inserted in that policy, 161 pages of it, I've read every word, highly interesting in that, but a table in the first couple of pages that were set in there that would say, for this type of line, you have this is what you're.
Typically, we use words like typically, yeah. We'll see if we can't get some good verbiage up on that.
Again, specific, site specific, where you're talking about up the road, that's all pressure.
It's all gonna have to be a pressure system.
So you would think, from what I'm hearing here, that's, easement's not gonna be a problem.
Of course, that's all ACWA, not us.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, you're going to, a low pressure system, more than likely, you're going to put it in with a ditch witch. It's gonna be something 4 to 6 feet wide, and you're gonna just trench it in. So you're not in a situation where you have to have the long reach track hose that are digging 26 to 28.
Because gravity, still, things flow. And you've got to, so much drop per so many feet.
But if Maddox or Duncan or somebody else is thinking about a site, it would be helpful if they would get the impression, we're gonna do a low-pressure system, that they would know or have a good idea that they would not have this 20-foot easement issue.
There's a caveat that you would have to be careful with there, because some people might try to come in and put in a low pressure system when it's not needed. Ideally, a gravity flow system is always better.
For Cub, that it has to be an approved low pressure area, which we're easy with. I mean, because if there's surface rock there or the water table's up, we're not going to say, yeah, buddy, just slug at it. Again, that would be ideally things that we could talk about as in the concept phase or the pre-design phase at the minimum.
I think one of the key things that you're trying to do here, and I think you're doing a great job at it, is putting the sales pitch on your documents. You're helping sell this community by what you read in that document. And now, I can come down here, and we can hear this, and you can tell us this, but if I just pick up that document and read it, it doesn't read the way
JD, I am thinking of hiring a PR firm for us, because apparently we have not done a good job getting that good word out about how stellar we are. We only think that apparently in our own minds. So I agree with you, and that's why the feedback is good, because we've got our heads down running a utility, and you're trying to do development. And sometimes we don't advertise, if you will, as well as we could, because we think it's a great and we're all convinced it's a great, and we're very easy to work with, but if that message is not out there, it's not helping us or you at all.
And bad news travels fast.
A lot faster, apparently.
So it's when some developer has a bad experience, then.
It is.
I mean, their timeframes are always short, and their money's always short, and so they go where it's easiest to get the project done. And
Although, I'm telling you, I see houses going up, and and I don't hear complaints about that. But low pressure, and we're on the next one, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to comment on that.
Well-
Because,
Just the background, I mean, what they want to do with, and do your comments to that, is right now, we essentially require a specific type of grinder pump, an E1. They are asking that they be allowed to use alternative that would do the same job, but they could get cheaper.
who are they? Which,
Duncan and Joe Hollingsworth.
again, with the Hollingsworth development, they can use a pump from Lowe's, as far as I'm concerned, because it won't affect us. It's not us. It's whatever ACWA agrees to is fine, because all we're gonna do is when that thing comes into Miller Road, we'll have a meter on with ACWA. So for you, for that, I don't care.
But somebody for the next development, if
So-
they look at it and say,
So then I'll address what Steve wrote. Cub allows a pressure system and E1 pump subject to board approval. Mr. Campbell encourages the use of this type system and the consideration of competitive brand pumps meeting specific criteria. My answer, simple answer to that is sure. Yes, no problem. Cub does encourage low-pressure systems for applications where gravity sewers are extremely costly or impractical, such as areas where substantial subsurface rock or high groundwater table is expected to be encountered. E1 grinder pumps have an average life of plus or minus 12 years. We've got some in service 15 years. Is that right, Dan? They are by far the dominant, if not the exclusive grinder pumps used by utilities in our area. However, Cub does and will consider other grinder pumps and have, for this reason, included within its standard specifications for construction of water and sewer utilities 7 pages of grinder pump performance specifications that are intended to provide alternative grinder pump suppliers with information regarding what will be required of a grinder pump to be used in Cub's low-pressure system. Now, since low-pressure sewer systems are designed for specific locations, head conditions, and number of connections, Cub may not allow a mixture of grinder pumps manufacturers to connect into their pump into a common low-pressure system. We have to have one kind of pump within the development. Pub also encourages privately owned, maintained, low-pressure sewer systems, equipment, and pumping. In such cases, the owner will be allowed to purchase and maintain any grinder pump system they choose, provided, for the owner's protection, these systems are appropriately sized grinder pumps with operating curves that do not allow backflow under the system-specific maximum head condition. So, in other words, you can use any pump that meets this specification, and it's not written just for E1s, but they have to meet that specification. We've had nice people come in that want to take us out to lunch and take us to their factories in Illinois and Spokane, and they say, try one, just try one. So we got some folks that are willing to test these out, and within months, they're back because it's not working, and they're out. I mean, we've gone through that scenario. So we're very protective about what we have to take over and maintain. If the homeowner wants to put in their system, and we had one nice fella whose brother-in-law had a spare pump, and he wanted to put that in, and because of the head that was on that, we said it was fine, it did work, and then he put it in, and then he replaced it, and on the 4th iteration, he came back in and got an E1 from us. So all of that's fine. We don't discourage. What we do is we tell them the success that we've had with E1s. But if they want to use something else, and it meets these specifications, and they're going to use it throughout the system, we're fine. If they want to own everything, and the property owner owns, as long as there's safety in the backflow part of it, then they can put whatever they want. If they want us to take it over, we're saying, we're working with pumps that are 12-year plus working. And we've got supplies are available and everything else. Find a pump that meets these requirements and standards and has a track record. This is not the first year they've got them out, and we'd be glad to look at it. Or we would be glad to let them put one in and try it out. And we'll see how that works on our system.
Have you tested any others that meet your requirements?
We have.
Could you list that then? You could say both E1 and F12 or
Haven't
whatever it
found
is.
one that will work.
Oh, you haven't, that's what,
No, it's a life cycle cost. You either pay me now or you pay me later. You buy a cheaper pump and put it in, and we have to replace it sooner. The developer wins, we lose. So we're looking at something like Greg said, with a track record. Nobody else has a track record of any pump that they can put up next to an E1. And before I wander out there and get a pump that meets all those specifications, unless it's got a track record, I'm gonna be
How many
very
did we
wary.
survey, Dan? How many did you survey on who's using E1s?
8 systems.
8 systems, and
And only one is using a flight pump, and nobody else is using any other kind of pump. And there's a lot
Other
of
than
grinder
E1s.
pumps. And other than E1, they exclusively, most utilities exclusively.
which means
E1,
they won't consider
nothing
anything else.
And as a matter of fact, there's one utility that had so much negative about a E1 grinder, or about grinder pump systems, period, and they tried a lot of different pumps. They will not allow any low-pressure sewers in their system at all. We allow low-pressure sewers because we've had good success with E1 grinder pump.
who makes E1? Who's the?
It's Environmental One, and it's made in New York. And E1 makes the pump, they make the basin it sits in, they make the control panel, and they warranty the whole thing. And sales and service is an hour and a half down the road, and they're in here all the time.
What else do they make? I've never heard.
E1 grinder pumps. I've never been
multitude
to the
of
factory.
They're like a WD-40 company that they just
If
have
you're
one
gonna be good
product?
in something, you're gonna specialize in
That's right.
something.
But still,
I'm surprised that GE or Siemens or,
Haven't bought them, yeah.
or don't have a competitive product.
You would think they would. A lot of people have tried because they see that there's a lot of people getting in a low-pressure sewer, particularly in Gatlinburg and around places where you got all these mountains and you run one little line, like he says, and trench it. It's the way to go. But they put in cheaper pumps and they're going back to replace them, and they say, I wished I'd have never put those in. And E1 pumps keep working.
but we are
Word of
not
God.
closed to
No.
evaluating, meet the specs. And part of that is, let us call the utilities that have used them and that they do have a track record
Right,
with.
right.
And we'll be glad to open that door. We're gonna need to buy, because we don't have the parts. Availability of parts would be part of the evaluation too, by the way. But we would get additional pumps to have them on our inventory, readily available. But right now, in Franklin Woods, Dan gets a call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday because the red light is going off in their backyard. And now nothing's flushing in their house because that's low pressure there. Our guy goes out and pulls up on the rails and pulls that grinder pump out and rails another one right in. I mean, and they're back in service just like that. We would want that same capability, and I'm not saying it can't be done, but we would want that kind of turnaround service for anyone in any residential development that we serve. ACWA, they have a different set of standards or requirements. I don't know what they are, but if they are going to maintain them, then they can set the requirements for whatever it is. For this project, we don't have a say in that.
add one more thing. The other utility that's using a different pump is using a Flight pump. Flight is a great company. We've got Flight pumps in our system in the big wastewater pump stations. The pump is made in China. The bucket is made in South Carolina that it goes in, and the controls are made in Arkansas. They've only used it for a year. They have no track record, and that's the only competition to an E1 pump. So, yes, we will consider anything, but we're wading into it. We got 150 pumps in the system. If you get this subdivision coming, and if it became ours, and you put 150 other kind of pumps in, you have no track record, and all of a sudden they start dropping like flies. I've only got 3 people that take care of 45 pump stations and 150 E1s. We're gonna put more people on, we're gonna have more expense. Very cautious about that. And it's hard to find a track record that use them. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Ready for me to go on to pipeline type and installation, Mr. Chairman?
Right, and again, the issue here is the preference for PVC and how much you can use PVC.
From the notes, PVC should be encouraged at depths of up to 12 feet. And the answer to that is yes. CUB will and has historically encouraged the use of PVC pipe for water main construction in areas where ductile iron mains are not specifically required, which may include but not limited to depth to bury, pipe manufacturer recommendations, site-specific excavation and backfill requirements, certain highway and railroad crossings, and proximity to streams, highways, and other piping. These requirements are generally based on TDEC requirements and sound engineering practices. This gets back to communication, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And yes, we use PVC. You know, the utility uses PVC. We would be thrilled with PVC unless whatever you're going through meets the level of required ductile iron, which we can be specific about that because that's based on TDEC. Now, to get onto the sewer, depths of 10 feet are allowed, but require stone backfill beginning at 6 feet. Standard requirements are generally 2 feet, and PVC is generally accepted up to 15 feet. Backfill requirements, like nothing better, is based on sound engineering practices, specification of the pipe manufacturer, and our site-specific conditions for the excavation of the proposed backfill methods, materials, location, and proximity of the excavation to a roadway, stream, or other utilities and jurisdictional requirements. For example, which is a good example, backfilling operations for excavation within a certain distance from asphalt or concrete pavement within Clinton city limits falls under the jurisdiction of the City of Clinton Public Works Department. Outside the City of Clinton, the limits fall under the jurisdiction of the Anderson County Highway Department. And within the state right-of-ways, it falls under the jurisdiction of the Tennessee Department of Transportation. We have no say over that when it gets into that close area. And I would be stunned if the city eased up on any restriction anywhere close to pavement within in the Clinton City. We have laid what I call airport roads down through, as we've gone through some of their specifications. I tip my hat to Lynn Murphy and that crew down there. They are right on top of it like nobody's business. Now, we have historically encouraged the use of PVC pipe with a minimum standard dimension of a ratio of 35 for use in wastewater collection main construction where lined ductile iron pipe mains are not specifically required. Everything gets down to what is specifically required by TDEC. So requirements for proper strength PVC pipe may vary generally depending upon the depth of bury. All of this to say, it's hard to do a blanket, yes, you can use PVC, you can use PVC if it meets these standards depending on the depth and the manufacturer's numbers and everything else. And that is all tied into the proximity to where it is with streams. And that's a lot of smoke about can we use PVC or not. But remember, I started by saying yes. TDEC specifically requires ductile iron in certain areas, and the ASTM, with the American Society for Testing and Materials, they put out these what they call identifiers of the D2321 about all PVC sizes, pipes, strengths, and everything. We have to follow those. We do follow those. Everything done then to and the final authority is TDEC on what they require. So we are not opposed to using PVC. We encourage PVC. We use PVC. If ductile iron is required, it's required for a reason. And then we're not backing up from that.
Well, can't we say it in that positive way that PVC is preferred unless TDET or something else requires the use of different material?
Well, I don't know if that I would use the word preferred, because they can pretty much, there is a basket, a variety of things that they can use, and if it's not outside of the required by TDEC, we won't have a problem. If they have a preference, they've got a deal on ductile iron, let them go do it. But we can say PVC is accepted, for different depths and everything, within the
Unless,
the specific jurisdictions and meet state requirements. Dan?
Question I've got is, why would anybody think that ductile iron is required by reading anything that's online?
The only thing that I saw, I'm not really familiar with why this got put on the list, or the list that he read off up here. There is a caveat though that after a certain depth, you have to go to ductile iron. It's, I believe, in your all specs.
Well,
I believe, but I'm not sure about that.
I don't know where that is. It came up and said ductile irons are required. Why don't you allow PVC? The way it's all written, we require PVC and in some cases ductile iron, so I don't know how they got flipped. That's another one.
But that's a good
Perceptions.
opportunity for us to help clarify.
Absolutely.
So again, answer to that is yes.
Everything we've talked about so far tonight begs for something out there folks can get to that they don't look at and say, I'm out of here, I can't do this. That it makes it seem like, if nothing else, okay, I can live with that, I need to understand more perhaps, but it's not written in a manner that says, I'm taking my business elsewhere. That makes sense.
Let me ask this, Steve. Would it be better if we took everything offline and then they'd have to come and talk to us? Because the first thing in the specs say, when you're in the conceptual stage, come and talk to us. We want to help you in your development, and that's what we do with everybody
That was the
comes.
second part of what I was gonna say, but I think if you don't have something online, you're gonna have people that won't come here, because
I agree with that.
it's, the access of getting here is different. But having something online that doesn't turn them off, that at least says, I think I can work with that, and then expediting the process where we sit down with a plat and work with them to a more finite definition of what they can do. Is that?
I think a lot of people then really didn't even delve into it, because I agree with what you said. If you read the way it is written exactly currently in the specifications that are up, it says we prefer an E1, but if you meet these specs, we'll allow you to use something different, which I think is a very fair statement. So I think somebody glanced through that and saw E1 and thought it was a sole source spec, but it is not written that way. So I think it's a way that it was
JD,
written in the specs.
I think that we need somehow to communicate in a positive way. Residential development is welcome, and we're here to help you get there in every way that we can. And And I submit that we haven't done anything in how we present and what we present or what we do that would do anything other than put that message out there. But
Perception.
we need to do more is what I see, and how we package it and how we present it. And part of that is not being defensive about what you're doing. Let me hear what you have to say, and then let's look at it afresh and anew, and say, well, yeah, that makes good sense. For 35 years, we charged to change your name on your utility bill. If you want a name change, you charge $10 as an administrative fee. And a lady come in and say, look, I got divorced. And I mean, I'm paying the bill, I'm living here, and he's out of state. And I don't want to look at his name every month. But I don't think it's fair or right for me to pay $10, to get his name off of there and my name on there. And I said, you're right. It doesn't make sense. It's not good sense. Even though we've been doing it for 35 years, it was never an issue until the issue was raised. And then we relook at that and say, under that circumstance, it's not practical, it's not fair, it doesn't make good sense, and then change that. So all of that's good. And that's the attitude I've taken on how we address this. Take a fresh look, make sure we're doing the right thing, and then adjustments. I want to recommend to you good ideas that make good sense, that are operationally sound, and that are good for our ratepayers. And so far, everything that was raised in the notes, including this space in the manholes, by the way, which we're coming up to, we can package in a way that I think that will be much more developer-friendly in the way it's packaged. Substantively, I don't see any change at all, to be honest with you.
I think
But-
up front, you have to say something that's user-friendly, that's.
Right,
and
that,
then-
which is what, we're-
Because most people are not gonna go through and read all of the nitty-gritty detail.
I don't know how that's gonna be exactly, Charles, but, I mean, that's what we're gonna work on. That's what my new PR firm, maybe their first assignment.
JD, is there a utility somewhere with a website that you think is written in a manner that does say, come here, that we could look at?
There you go. Thank you, Steve. That's a good idea. Or if you can send us
I
something.
bet we could find it on
I'll send
Pinterest.
you- Because I don't think, I don't think there's one out there that's perfect. There's not. But there are a series of them that you can take the best ideas from.
I think that's great.
Why do people look for ways to go to Hardin Valley?
Why do they look to go to Hardin Valley?
Yeah.
like
They-
traffic.
Developers looking for to put out a new subdivision, they try to find a place there. Is there a reason that they try to find a property there rather than here?
And the size and what you develop dictates. The first thing you have to look at is income. How much do the people make in that area? Then what you look at is the jobs in a surrounding area versus the rooftops. And that's why someone would look. So that's gonna be the first thing that triggers. And this is why Clinton could be such a hot market right now, because you have so many jobs that are being in these industries and things out here that are just keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. Now, the other thing, what you have to look at there though, is what that income is associated with the jobs. And that's going to tell you what someone can afford as a house. So then you start looking at a lot cost, and then you start looking at the cost to develop that lot. That is what makes or breaks an area for a developer. If it costs $15,000 to develop a lot, and I'm just throwing a number out there, for the water, the sewer, the electric, and everything else to get to it. But you can go to the same jurisdiction next door, and you can do that lot for $12,000. Well, if you're only talking one exit down the interstate, you're gonna go that next exit down.
I know the developer, or I know his father-in-law, who just finished project over there, looking for his next development, and he ended up with a location there in Hardin Valley. And I asked him, through his father-in-law, we got a lot of property in Clinton, and there's a demand for housing in Clinton, if you look at the factors that you looked at. And his reply was, they're too hard to deal with, I'm not not gonna waste my time over there.
And it is a perception that is out there. And I don't know, I don't live in Clinton. I started working in this area 5 years ago, but I used to work for a general contractor in Knoxville, and historically speaking, there was a perception. Now, I've worked great with Ernie. I've worked great with Dan. I don't agree with what I'm about to say because everyone has been very helpful with me, especially with everything that we've done. But there is a perception out there in the community that CUB is hard to do. So I'm stating that. I hope I don't upset anyone, but.
No, that's it. I mean, we want to know how we can
it's
change
truth.
that. Yeah.
And I think Greg's hitting the point very good, just some of the wording. Yes, we want to do this, and, let it be known that people will come out there and help you. And then it doesn't, dead hard set rules hurt everyone. If you say, no, you can't do this, but you don't give an explanation as to why that comes along with it, that's where people get their feelings hurt.
Do y'all realize that we've sat here for almost an hour talking about this, and we're all saying the same thing? Your
Perception.
side, this side, whether it's 20 feet with a caveat or 15 feet with a caveat, we're all gonna land at the same spot when it's time to sign off. We're saying the same thing. I've been listening, and,
Yeah, me too.
I think the umbrella over all of us is communication, perception, and perception is a reality. We're doing a lot of good things at CUB, and we evidently are not doing a good job at conveying it in a positive light to support our developers. I think from what I'm hearing everybody saying at the listening session, but we're all saying the same thing. We all want development. We all want residential development. Everybody sitting here wants to help developers. I think the developers are wanting our help, but we're all saying the same thing. I mean, as we go down this list, we're in agreement from what you're saying, Greg, and you're the expert up here and your team, but it's a perception.
Some is perception, some is real. 20 versus 15 is a real thing.
Well, but we say 20 with a caveat or 15 with a caveat. We're saying the same thing because we're going to
Well, I
try to
think
do
those
the
are totally,
best
if you say
deal.
20 with the caveat, that's different than saying 15 with the
Well, what I'm
caveat.
saying is it's all in the writing. If we can rewrite whatever it is that is being a stumbling block to our developers, that's an easy fix.
Yeah,
And
and
to
I think
me,
Greg is
yeah, I'm
saying that he
here-
can make
yeah.
those
We
changes
can
pretty
still
quickly.
make those changes on the website, and people can read those, but if the perception is in the community that we're hard to deal with, those changes, I don't think, are gonna make that much of a difference. Somehow, we've gotta change the perception.
One good success story would go a long ways.
Well,
Exactly.
that's fixable. I mean, a perception
It
that we're
is.
hard to work with, I mean, that's a terrible thing, but it's fixable.
Part of what I think, has been systemic in the way we're perceived with developers is the fact that we have not challenged any of the miscommunication and misinformation or any time that issues were raised that were not factual. We have not publicly challenged that. And I'm committed to do a better job at proactively identifying the source and accountability associated with this, if it's intentional or not, why you would say that we require ductile iron when there's nothing ever, or who said that, and
Well,
we'll
it's
try
a-
to help that. You see,
It's a
we have let all
communication.
of that go by
Communication issues.
When JD came, just a quick side note, and I know you want to get back onto water and sewer, but when I first met JD, and he came to the office with the plat on electric, and one of the very first things out of your mouth after I asked you if you wanted to Diet Coke or something, was, what's the deal with this 30-foot easement? And I'm like, where did you get that from?
We had been originally told. It was
Yeah.
30 days.
So someone takes an occurrence that happens in a completely different circumstance with a completely different situation, different character line, different voltage line in the case of electric, and an easement that is fixed for that, and they try to connect dots that aren't meant to be connected by communicating back. CUB requires a minimum of 30-foot easement.
It's a communication problem, and if I were sitting in your seat thinking what you and the others the other night were thinking, then yeah, I'd be upset too. But what I'm hearing is we need to do a better job at explaining what we do and why we do.
And how we
And-
present it, and how it's
we present
presented.
it. We need to, we need to work on that. If that's out there, that's something we can work on. But so far as we've gone through here, we're all agreeing on everything. And an hour into this, you're agreeing with what we are. We're agreeing. So it's a communication, explanation, wrong perception. We're trying to help. We're trying to help grow. And I'm like Greg, I appreciate the opportunity to hear and listen, because we need to fix some of this so that everybody can go forward together positively. I agree. So
We can fix all these things we're talking about in the literature, on the website, Facebook. We can present a better picture to the world when they come to us. But I think it will take a long time for that perception to go away if we don't do something more proactive, like promoting the city and development. So I think that needs to be an element of it somewhere.
I agree. Perception is hard to change because that's a big wheel to start turning in an opposite direction if there's a negative perception, and it appears that there is. So
The perception of this negative that we've been batting back and forth, just to be clear, if you asked the average customer or household anywhere across the 6 counties, I would say that their perception of Cub is very good because of the service that they have. And they do have a track record, and we do have a track record of that.
And I agree, and Greg, I don't mean to interrupt, but I agree, and I think the ratepayer has a good perception of CUB. I think the issue is the developers, or some developers, or however we want to say that, want something more from us. So we're listening and we're trying, but I hope that comes across as we're on the same page, we're on the same team, we're trying, so we're, back to you, Greg.
I've got spacing of manholes, because according again to the notes Steve took, that the required manhole spacing of 300 feet is compared to 400 feet or 500 feet by most utilities adds cost, suggests 400 feet additional justification offered in the document. So we've talked about that, and to get a full understanding, I don't have any problem with changing that wording from 300 feet to 400 feet. That will be acceptable in areas where all that spacing conforms to TDEC, and because TDEC has some rigid requirements, as well as sound engineering practices for construction, and it will that will provide CUB's efficient and effective operations and maintenance. TDEC requires manholes at the end of 8-inch diameter sewer or greater, and CUB will waive this requirement if it's stubbed out and is installed, assuming there will be an extension in the future. In our way of saying you don't have to install the manhole, if you're gonna get there, stub it out, and that we think would also be an added gift to developers. TDEC requires manholes at all changes in grade, size, or alignment, and at all intersections. I mean, that's just a TDEC requirement. So to get 400 feet, a 400-foot length in this terrain living around here in the small service area of our water and sewer department, I don't know that you're gonna find that many, but if we can find a 400-foot stretch, then that would be, we're absolutely fine with that. And if we can change that wording from spacing from 300 to 400 feet,
Why not do it?
why not do it? Exactly, exactly. So we would be happy, and we will be recommending that the board allow us to make that change.
I think that's I think that's a prime example, because if I'm taking a plat out, pulling a piece of property, I've sketched up a road real quick, I've looked at the rules, and it says 300 versus 400, you just cut the cost by $15,000 to $20,000.
Yeah, well, that's easy call.
Yes.
The reality of it is, should have we gone through that design process, although this doesn't help you because, you know, again, you're,
Low pressure system.
Right.
This would be for somebody.
right, but what I'm saying is, anyone in the design that hasn't talked to us and they see that, that's an automatic manhole at 300 feet, where in the reality of it wouldn't necessarily been at 300 feet. If the design for that, a flat stretch of 400 feet, we'd have been good with that even in the design. But to change that to 400 feet I think is a positive move. All right, that's all I've got on water, if you want me to start with electric.
Let's go electric.
Notes from Steve on electric, and this is dealing with the easement widths. The CUB easement of 20 feet or larger, and the standard feet of 15 on virtual all utilities. Easements are based upon the highest voltage and the most expansive circuit arrangement present, with widths must vary to comply with the provisions of the National Electric Safety Code and accommodate particular circuitry which exists at the site. Now, nobody's gonna disagree with that. Do you see? I mean, this is a deadly product that we've got here, and does it conform with the code? It needs to conform with the code, and it's different on voltage. So, a blanket statement of maximum widths will simply not work, because of the fact that we need to know what kind of secondary or primary or the voltage or whatever it is. It makes a difference. So I know that Joe suggested 5 foot for easements down the lot lines. Well, sometimes that will be appropriate, but it's depending on what we've got going down the lot lines. The problem we've got is the blanket statement for electric. That's really where the rub comes, to put a blanket statement out there. We could put the minimum widths required, you know, and things like that. Maybe a better way to package that, which wouldn't change the function of what we do, but it might repackage the way we're saying it. We're going to work with you on every lot line or easement that we have in order to accommodate the best way we can, given the fact that we have to have so much depending on the voltage, depending on what we do.
Can you just list voltage ranges and say, for this range, we require a minimum of X number of feet?
Well, see, if you go down a lot line in this subdivision, it's different if you're going down a lot line in a baby farm, because we don't know what's going to come there. You see, so you can't do 5 feet there when they're going to 5 years from now or 10 subdivide that thing, and now we're going to get all kinds of development in there, and we're sitting there with a low voltage line to serve the one guy's house and a barn. So so it depends on the, what it is that they're developing. It depends on what it is and what we see the potential future growth that's associated with that. And of course, it depends on the first day, the voltage of the line that we put in front of that.
It depends on if it's overhead or underground. It depends on if it's single phase or three phase. It depends on if it's a distribution or a transmission line. It depends on if there's already a reserved easement, like we have taken over lines from TVA, and they have, it's just it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Now, we can do these general statements with the little footnotes down there, kind of like what we've been talking about. Typically, you know, we can do da-da-da-da, and then you got all the fine print like the medical commercials, you know.
But I don't think
I think
that,
that we need all of that, because, I mean, I think that we need to be specific, but also give the perception that we're willing to work with the developer. I think that when we get too wordy, that's whenever it comes across, oh, these people are gonna be hard to work with. I mean, if they've got all this information and they're being this specific on here,
I don't
There's
think
no
a
need to
phrase
separate.
like, in all that we do in terms of easements, a phrase that would somehow be similar to the utility will work in concert with the developers to minimize the impact of easements
absolutely,
in their development.
absolutely.
And that's a true statement. It's because it's what we do now. But it sends the message, hey, you got an issue and you're trying to do this and we know what you're trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean that we lay down or we're going to minimize our requirements, especially based with safety. But it does send the message, hey, we're going to work with you on how many easements and the requirements of easements that we have to minimize the intrusion for any developer. I think that's a fair statement, and I think it's what we practice now. In order for us to do that, we have to get the plat, you see, and we've got to engineer that. I mean, so we'll know.
You could tell when JD came in, back to the example, within 3 minutes by inspection, we could tell JD affirmatively that for the prospects of an underground residential subdivision with lots as small as he had laid out, that we could easily accommodate the 5 foot on either side of the line and the 10 foot on the exterior. Am I not correct? Did I tell you that? So, but you can't just publish that out front, because if JD had lots that were 600 feet deep and we had to extend high voltage lines through there, that would not be the case.
But 5 feet would be the minimum then. You could say that.
You know, I think you're setting, my personal opinion is you're setting a mousetrap right there, CP. I don't think you want to, with a high voltage line, get into any kind of ambiguity on that. We have to keep safety as the forefront. In Dan's case, they can dig up his line and it can spew, and in my case, they're dead. So, you know, some things are rigid. Some things have to be rigid. And I know we can message it, Penny. I hear that. I understand what you're saying on the messaging. We can write it up, a more sugarful or colorful way. But at the end of the day, a design professional is going to have to look at each situation and come up with the easements. And in this case, like I say, within 5 minutes, there's no debate. Because I instantaneously told them, yeah, it's great. In fact, where did you hear this other?
But I think what we would like to message out there is that just as you did, that CUB will work with all developers in order to minimize the impact of easements in their development, which is essentially what you did. you minimize the impact because you're saying, 5 foot on each side, and we're
It's
good to go.
appropriate for his
So-
subdivision.
So that would send that message, again, not change what we do, but change how we present it. We can't, I would never recommend that the board adopt a policy to minimums. I would never recommend that, because minimums push us into liability when those minimums aren't met, when you miss it by just a little bit. The code says this is the minimum. We don't provide minimums in how we do business. But I think it's fair, and I think as a developer, I myself would like to hear the phrase that the CUB will work with all of the developers on how those easements are, that they're just not rubber stamped into your development.
Agree. Here's the only caveat on electrical. This was my perception. That was my reality when I came and met with you. I've looked everywhere. These rules aren't published anywhere. Your all's documentation for electrical and how it is handled is published nowhere.
That is for a good reason why it's not published anywhere on any other utility that I'm aware of.
So,
I spent, after you told me that the other day about clicking, I went to KUBs, I went to Sevier counties, I went to like 4 websites. I spent 4 or 5 hours at home trying to click and find and mine that kind of detail. Call me dumb, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And I think the reason folks are hesitant to put that kind of information out there is it can come back and bite you. And that's why I'm so hesitant on something that involves safety. So I caution you on that.
Water and sewer,
the rules are the rules. If the rules are out there and I can read the rules, there's no denying. If the rule is, if your subdivision has if you're at a certain power level, you can get by with 5 feet. That's what our requirement is. If it goes over a certain power level, we have to have a lot larger easement.
It's not a power level. It's not a power level. It's the size and the orientation of the lots. And I had no idea until you showed me the plat that was the case. And I don't know how, without seeing the plat, that any engineer could validate that would be the case or not.
The thing is, though, there are rules.
Right.
Why can't those rules be published? This is our standard. This is our rules. This is what we have to
It
abide
sounds like there's just so many variations to
There
those
is
rules of
so
electricity.
many, yes, of that theme.
I hope that I've not given the perception that I don't value safety first, because that is at the forefront of all of this discussion is safety. But I do agree with what you said just a minute ago. We do need to sugarcoat it a little bit to give that perception, not to falsify information, but to give that perception that we are going to work with you in any way. But it sounds like there's so many variations to those rules. It's not black and white with electricity.
It would take, imagine a table, and we'd have these really pretty, nice, concise distances and rules, and then the next 2 pages would be footnotes and exceptions. That's what you would get with electric. Because the possibilities, I can't even count them in my brain right now.
JD, do you know of a website, a utility website that
And I'll
lists?
send one, and I'm going off the top of my head, I think Prince George Electric in Virginia's one, and the reason I know these is I'm in multiple states, so I see them. I haven't specifically went and looked for the rules on KUB. I'm pretty sure Prince George has it. I'll find a couple. And I'll send
Again,
it.
if we have one we can look at and evaluate that and see if we can
Absolutely.
adapt that, then that would be something that would be beneficial
I would
to
be
us.
highly impressed if they covered all those details.
That's right.
Yeah, I would
don't
be
think
really
it's a
impressed.
matter of covering all the
Yeah.
details. It's the loose, I need a quick answer. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not going to try to go out there and find a caveat, well, I want to do a transmission line of this size, this size, this size. If it's a transmission line, I'm obviously going to call it. If it is something inside of a subdivision that's running a single-phase service underground, that's much different than us going out here and trying to put a substation in. It's going to
Sure.
And I don't think anybody's looking for the rules of a substation.
those are
extreme.
Yeah, but to the untrained eye, and you're more of a trained eye, but most folks aren't near as astute as you on development and recognizing utilities. The average person hardly even notices there's a pole in front of their house, much less if it's high voltage, low voltage, transmission, or whatever, unless they happen to remember from their deed that there was an easement or something across their property.
But you know what, Ernie, I bet we could write a paragraph, any of us could write a paragraph that starts off with would work with a developer to
Sure.
make it as financial attainable for a developer. But
Absolutely.
each.
Minimize the impact of
Yeah,
easements.
Oh, yeah.
but all we would have to say, and maybe site specific, and we
Yes,
would
ma'am.
require that the developer come in, just the general rules, so that we could make sure that we are meeting every requirement, rule, and regulation of local, federal, and state expectations.
Absolutely.
See, that's a very positive, we're gonna work with everybody, but I agree that if you start writing all the rules and regulations, and it will take 2 or 3 pages of footnotes, but a very general, positive, we're working with the developer.
And we can. And if that's the pleasure, then, we got some pretty good wordsmithers around here that can come up with good language. I would submit to you, though, that if this guy, really nice, super guy that I've got to meet, and I think I'm on his Christmas card list now. If he got that nice sugar-coated language, the first thing he would do? He gonna call me on the, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Tell me the distance, tell me the number, I need to know. I understand the perception for, Joe Blow, but JD is gonna pick up the phone and call because it really, even though it sounds good and we can make it sound really good and inviting and warm,
Yep.
it's not gonna be very substantive because you can't shoot that arrow at a specific point when you really don't even know what you're aiming at until you see what they've got in mind.
Okay, I understand, and I agree with you. I'm just trying, and I know you all want numbers. I'm just trying to funnel them into CUB so we can explain everything that we can in writing. That was my thinking, but.
Yeah.
We need to get
I
them in.
agree.
We need to get them in, and then hopefully we'll do a good job. And like we've done with JD on some of the misconceptions that he's had with LCUB. But going back to what I originally said on the deal with the easements for both electric and water, the developer for development, the CUB will work with the developer in order to minimize the impact of easements in their subdivision. That's what we are tasked to do, and that's what we will do. That's what we've done, but we don't advertise it like that. And I think it would help if we did say, come in, talk, and then reasonable people that are proficient and professional in the area that we're talking about. We get an expert in water and sewer, we get an expert in electric. A reasonable person in either of those fields would look at what we're saying and say, oh yeah, that makes good sense. Now, an uneducated person in this area or in that field may not get it. But if we bring an expert in, anything that we talk about, a reasonable person should be going, that makes good sense. If it doesn't, if they can't, if they're not saying that, then we need to look hard at what we're doing and why we're doing it, because we're not doing something right for that. Because everything that we are proposing would make good sense to people in the field of expertise that we're talking about. That makes good sense to do that. But how we package that and how we sell and how we administer this, it's more than sugarcoating. It's administering, our desire to minimize the negative impact that any easements have. Now, we can't do anything with setbacks and things like that that the city puts out there, or the county puts out there, or the state puts out there. We can't help you with that, but we should be able to help you with if your development wants infrastructure, and it includes electric, water, or sewer, and you're in the city of Clinton, how can we help minimize the impact that that has on you? So that's what I'm committed to doing, and how we message that we'll work on. Now, here's where, JD, you need to, because if you're wore out, this is where you're going to get a little pushback. And it's conduit. Conduit installation. From the notes, CUB should allow all primary conduit to be completed by any state licensed subcontractor. CUB can bid on the work if they want to do the work. I don't know if that came from Mr. Campbell or what, but I know this came from Joe. Match the lowest bidder on conduit installation. If you want to do it, just match low bid. He told me that. So experience has proven many times over to all of us sitting here that the lowest bidder may not be the best suited or the best bid to take. Only when qualifications, experience, reputations, licensing, certification, and the like are equal should bids be weighed equally. With the above said, should any supplier, vendor, be able to furnish the required materials as specified by CUB at a lower price than what CUB can purchase the items, we would welcome the cost savings and pass the same along to the customer. You can buy it, if you can buy the conduit less than what we can, it's the same conduit. Your brother-in-law's got an inn somewhere, go to it. Materials aside, and assuming transportation, shipping, and handling costs are not an issue, all that remains is the cost to install the conduit system. CUB views the lower voltage underground networks, which is 12240, which is like a service line, is much different light than we do our 15,000 volt primary underground cable system. As for the low voltage installation, CUB will gladly afford developers the option to install this system according to CUB specifications. We agree, no problem. The low voltage, no problem. Low voltage systems are much more forgiving in terms of overcoming the common installation areas and oversights made by field personnel. So,
Errors.
Right.
Installation errors.
So, primary, we want to put that conduit together. Secondary, low voltage, we don't care, it's fine if the developer puts that together.
What about the utilities that allow the developer to do the primary also?
What about those?
Yeah,
What about them?
what about them?
Are we-
If KUB can allow it,
And LCUB,
and LC, why can we not?
You know, COA, Spear County.
Yeah.
In fact, this is the only utility company that I personally know of that actually does the work.
well, according to Mr. Campbell, we have the lowest outage rate in the state, which is a smile because I don't know where he got that information from. But the fact is that we are very particular about control over primary. That affects more than a single secondary to a customer. That is our primary system. And what you get down to in your case, in your subdivision, the allocation for that cost is about $9,000.
It's actually more than that. And here's, if you look at the raw dollars, you're right, I thought it was a little more than that when we talked. But other part of it is, you dictate our schedule at that point. We have to wait on you. So, and I use this on our industrial buildings, our big buildings that we do. In just raw upfront cost, it cost us $1,000 a day to be on a job site. I can't imagine that it's gonna be any different out here, especially when you start putting in carrying costs and interest on what. What happens when it snows? You have this ice storm that I heard you all talking about earlier. You're completely shut down. you're gonna be out working on lines for 3 weeks. We just ran the risk of losing 3 weeks worth of production.
Well, then, great that you brought that up, because I then have an answer for that. Because this will alleviate that concern, because I thought we were only dealing with the $9,000 and then the delta between what it would cost a subcontractor to put that in and what we would charge you. We're only talking about that delta, and that could just be a few thousand, 3,000 or 4,000. But since you introduced these extra costs, which are valid and real, which I didn't take into consideration, the workaround that I can offer you there is you get a licensed electrical contractor, for example, Service Electric or Pike or whatever. I mean, they do some of our industrial loads for us. We would approve those or others that are that we can, submit if you've got somebody special. And if they meet that requirement, as these others would, then you could contract with them, and then you're good to go, and that keeps us out of the picture. But it puts a licensed electrical contractor in there, not a subcontractor. It's a licensed electrical contractor, and then we're good to go. And that should answer and alleviate the concerns, the other concerns, other than just this $9,000 in cost.
Completely understand. Or completely, I have been told verbatim over and over and over again, no one is going to put our conduit in other than us.
Well, this is a great revelation, because we'll be on board with that, because it makes sense, and that way you can coordinate with them to meet your schedule and timing, and it takes us, we're not looking for 3 men in a truck out there to put this conduit together. We're saying,
That's what we've been afraid of, and always want to guard against is rent-a-help and a can of glue. And that just won't work at the primary level.
so fabulous, if that will alleviate that concern for you, because it alleviates that concern for us.
If we use a licensed contractor, you all are perfectly okay.
Licensed electrical contractor. Let us know who that is.
They're gonna have to have experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
not the first time out there.
We don't want to bring in somebody
Just make sure she can get it.
who's going to mess it up.
Good.
You wouldn't, but some would.
I understand, but if it's a licensed electrical contractor, let's take a Massey Electric, for example, who does a lot of work up here. Massey does $8 million a year worth of electrical. I don't see why their guys wouldn't be just as capable as others.
And you still have, or we would still have the right to inspect.
Which is what we would do, yeah,
Yes.
we would do, but I mean, we're gonna feel really good about those, and that would take it, and we'll still, if you say, well, they're charging, and I think they're gonna charge more than we would, but I don't know, but if you're saying, because of these other factors that I didn't factor in, because I could say, how in the world could that make more sense? But I see where it could. But if at the end of the day you say, Cub, can you do that? We're always glad to do it, and we'll give you that number. You say, but get this other number, then you need to make an evaluation. But yes, the answer to that is yes.
We can go get our own bids, and as long as they're a licensed electrical contractor,
That, you need to check
With
with us.
experience, with
Yeah.
you working with
Let us
utilities.
run it by us.
approved electrical.
That's
approved,
right.
CUD approved electrical.
Yes.
Yes. And it's not like we're gonna hold, the bar so high that nobody.
And the reality is ever since I've been here, we have allowed with the same criteria, specification, to put in primary underground for industrial and commercial. We have never, until this year, even been approached by anyone, developer, on a residential level, who would have any desire whatsoever to do this. But if you got that desire and you got those people and they're capable and they have the licensing and the insurance and the experience, it's no different for us than when we give service to a bank or a food line or whatever out here. So, great.
I think that's awesome.
Okay.
Great. Fabulous. I'm telling you, we're rocking here.
Well, the next one should be easy, too.
Oh, yeah. Cost estimates? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To the notes, there should be no fees to estimate work to be performed by CUB. All designs need to be approved by CUB to meet minimum state requirements. And then from Joe, no design fees up front, and he's willing to forfeit his. Well, here's the good news. No design fees, and he doesn't have to forfeit anything. So how that works is, as you know, or as now you've experienced, you come in for a WAG, and we're going to give you that, however that is, and however the timeliness of it, what you need, and the specificity that's associated with that WAG. As you want more specificity before it is engineered out, then we have to devote PE time to do that, and you are going to be responsible if the project never goes forward. But should the project go forward, including the full engineering of the project, all that is rolled into the total cost of the job, and essentially there is no cost for that. No additional, no adder, no nothing. Don't do the project, and we put PEs on significant time allocation, and then we're going to collect back from you. That's how that works.
When we first came in, before we could actually lay down our schematic plan, we were expressed, we had to sign the document, that we would reimburse you all for any time spent.
JD. That's not true. That is not true.
You gave me my first swag.
That is not true.
Before we,
That didn't happen that way.
my perception is wrong, because what happened was we had to sign the document, and I said, we need to put a cap on this, on what the fee will be, before you go in and actually lay out anything. It gave us a more firm.
I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. So let's back up. Because we're professional people, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you come in, you lay your drawing down, and we start talking, and I told you that's the first time I've even seen this drawing, right? We go through, and we spend a lot of time, yada, 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 and you're really insistent on some type of estimate. You told me LCUB pricing, and they gave it to you, right off the spot, and it was a guarantee. Reluctantly, we gave you an estimate right then in the office. You didn't sign a thing. Okay, now I misunderstood you then, because I thought you said before we did anything, we made you sit down and sign a paper. We didn't even bring paper up. We gave you the estimate.
You handed me the document when I handed you the other. So you handed me that document. You said, this is nothing you can bind me to. This is what we wanted at the moment. We needed that number. And you said, before I confirm any of this up and give you something that we can more live with, or that would be more of a guarantee, you all have to sign this.
That's true.
We gave you this, what we call a WAG.
Right.
Okay? We did before you left the office, but that wasn't sufficient for you. Me, it was fine. For you, you wanted more. And you told me not only that on Friday, that we would have a plat to work with, actually by the time you left the office, but it got at 10 till 5 on Friday, and that you had to have it by close of business the following Tuesday, or the project could just be off. So I did all I could to give you some good idea of the cost, and I gave you that number right then. Okay. All right. Then, when it wasn't good enough and you wanted us to drill further, and I said, good gosh, we've got to get this by your timeline. I got Monday and close of business to Tuesday, and I'm going to have to get all my folks, drop everything and do that. And then and only then did we talk about cost reimbursement. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Well, good. I'm glad we got that clear.
Trial. Wait a second. No, sir. Cost reimbursement was discussed before I ever left out of there, because you had have, this part two is what you'll be responsible for if we go any further than this.
But that is true, part two is. The initial visit and that first WAG was free. But when we are then required to drill down, and at each level that we drill down further until full engineering of the project, all we're trying to do is protect ourselves. If nothing happens, we have dedicated a significant amount of staff and time. But none of that will be in terms of actual cost should the project move forward. Because all of that then rolls right in to the total cost of the project. There is no cost for that. It is free, including everything that, up to that date that was done. It's,
And I explained that to you, and you said it on the phone. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and
When
I-
I assured you.
But
Okay.
again, now, I will state this as a fact. This is the only jurisdiction of 17 states that has ever asked.
well, I don't know about what other people do on that, but for us because I don't know how many PEs they've got working at their utility. We do a lot of our stuff in-house. If we had to factor that out to a firm in order to engineer these, then there's a cost associated with that for you, as we would for any any developer that especially was under circumstances that required a time constraint, to where we literally dropped what we were doing, because it's not like they're sitting up there doing nothing, saying, because of the time constraint that you had, the drop dead, I gotta have it before, then we marshaled all of our department in order to meet that more refined WAG for you. And then we're saying, since that initial $1,300 a lot guess, you need it more, because you're trying to refine your projections for a profitable development, then you are then burdening this utility and its staff in order to meet that goal for you. And for that, we're saying that doesn't cost you anything. But if at the end of the day, we've spent 80 man-hours on designing your subdivision and it doesn't go forward, we need reimbursed for that. If it goes forward, there's no cost associated with that at all. So I don't know if other firms say, bring us an engineered plat, and to where, I know of some utilities not too far from here that couldn't put that together for you, that they might have to go to a firm to get that done. But we do that in-house, and we allocate time associated with that. And as long as the project moves forward, then there is no cost to developer for any of that engineering time. It only comes into play if there is no development. Because everybody would like to say, engineer this for me, and when we do, we're saying, as long as it moves forward, there's no cost. If it doesn't come to fruition, all of this time that we spent in design specifically and only for you, then you're gonna have to reimburse us our actual time associated with that project.
Simply, I completely understand that. I understand every word of it. I am simply saying you all are the only group to do that. Now, I want to speak to a point you said about jumping through hoops to do it. Yes, and from my side of the fence, for a second, there are often times that we have a small window where a deal can be done, and we have to pull that trigger.
Sure.
This particular property had it's two separate pieces, had a closing date on one of them, that we were coming up to the end of our option. If we couldn't have got that number, which thank you so much for doing for us.
You're welcome.
But those are the kinds of moves that developers, if you ever want to send somebody my way to talk about how quick you all turned that around, and I'll be an advocate and a spokesman for you every day. But that's something that has to happen. You can't tell a developer, I'll get back to you in a month and a half.
Oh, and?
Oh, and I can't imagine this case that's never happened.
So that's the first part of that, but the other part of that is,
And we didn't, and typically, I mean, it was a unique situation. I don't know that any other utility has been served up that same pressing circumstance where they gave you a number and then you had to have another number by, yada, yada, yada. It was pretty unique, but at the end of the day, it's all about just making sure the ratepayers don't pay for it.
I end up doing that every day, because we will run across something where, man, we gotta have this sitting right now.
Well, I'm in industrial economic development, and in that field, there is a lot of that. You really have generally an afternoon. You're lucky if you get 24 hours. You see, so there is that kind of speed and turnaround. I don't know. I don't know where other utilities are on this. I would hazard a guess that very rarely would you be able to get that kind of a quick turnaround on anywhere other than here. Whether or not you have to write a check for that would only come into play if we spun our wheels and nothing happened.
Quick turnaround aside, just a concept that's different apparently here than when I used to buy things as a commercial person. If somebody is working on the possibility of doing a development, and they go through and it has to be engineered, and so you get down to the whole thing, and for whatever reason, FEMA or whatever, it's a no-go. Do we think we can get those people to pay us back for work that we have done?
Oh,
on that issue work?
we wouldn't have a chance if we didn't have a cost reimbursement agreement, which we do. And we require of any of those folks where we could spend a substantial amount of time, and in this case, they didn't even own the property, they're just speculating to buy it, and then later on you get the phone call, I don't think so, So what happens to all those costs? We have always felt that we were stewards of the ratepayers,
Well,
and therefore we need to protect, and that's
And I
how we've
think
always
I think
operated.
that's a concept that maybe we need to look at a little bit more. We are stewards of the ratepayers, but we're also an arm of the city who wants to encourage development. And that's kind of a cost of doing business, is providing engineering work for people so they can determine whether or not they can build something here.
You would be surprised, Charles, although this one was unique, you would be surprised at the number of requests that come through like that. And if you end up doing them at no cost, then you're going to probably need to hire some more folks.
It is prohibitive, and to me, it's not unreasonable for an expectation when you ask anybody to perform a service for you that has the gain of a development, and when that doesn't happen, if you spend significant time, not an hour or three, but significant time on providing them to the level of detail that they require, and not have an expectation to protect that money and time if they fail to meet their goal of providing this development. That is a reimbursement for time spent.
And again, that kind of is perception, because, on the one hand, we're doing them a necessary job, a favor, or whatever, to do that work. But on the other hand, we're courting them. We're trying to get them to build something here. And you were saying,
We turn out proposals. We turn out on average 2 to 3 a day. They go all across the United States. And actually, in fact, we turn out these proposals all across the world in a lot of situations. We are courting, like you just said, we're sending these proposals out to try to bring someone either to Anderson County or one of our other developments. So if we told somebody that we were gonna charge them for that proposal, what their cost estimate was gonna be, they throw it in the trash and they never talk to us.
That's true. But you're talking industrial development, you're not talking residential. And that's a different animal. That's a different
And
animal.
you're talking about
I'm
for-profits.
talking about a residential developer. Forget us. If I picked up the phone and I was calling South Carolina right now and said, hey, I've got a piece of property under auction because you all are coming in residential. And they said, I'm gonna charge you for this estimate. I'm gonna go to the next utility company.
Well,
Yeah, but you didn't hear that. What you heard was, you heard a number that's what you wanted. And there was nothing about charge. You heard the number. You asked for the estimate, you got an estimate, it was free. But that wasn't good enough. You wanted more, and you wanted it quick. Okay.
What would a small performance bond cost against the completion of the subdivision? If rather than them paying for the design, they had to buy a small performance bond and we would not even execute that bond if they walked away from the subdivision.
I would think first they have to own it. In this case, they don't even own the land. They're just in talking about the possibility of procuring the land.
I don't know whether the ownership would have anything to do with it or not. I mean,
If
they
they could-
would pay a small fee to somebody to post a bond that.
I mean, I
we
guess
would
you get
take.
like a letter of credit from a bank or something.
Well,
well, there would be
you
actual
wanna get out
cost.
of jail, you gotta put $10 out for a $1,000 bond. It's something like that we would ultimately collect the fee on the bond if they walked away from the subdivision.
There would be actual cost involved for a company to do that. I'm thinking, and you would know better than I would, JD. I'm thinking, now, there's like a performance bond for contractors and stuff, but if everyone that comes in here has the, like you, would have the expectation that they are going to fulfill, especially when they get down to the level past that first WAG, the level of refinement, that their expectation is to build a subdivision. So and then to say, well, we would need a bond to engineer this for you. I don't know if that would be less or more of an irritant to a developer. All we say, and I think it's appropriate, that depending on how much you require from us to do your engineering for your subdivision, for these utilities, and if we spend our time doing that, and you don't perform and build that subdivision, then we get reimbursed for our costs. If you do actually build your subdivision, then there is no cost for anything that we've done. For the life of me, I don't see where that is an unreasonable position.
Is that what you run into anywhere else?
Again, this cost agreement that we signed, cost reimbursement, was the first time we've ever.
How many subdivisions have you been involved in, Steve? I mean, JD?
Total subdivisions.
Residential subdivisions. So in your experience, you have built 15 or 20?
It's really, to me, not much different than the paper that, I don't know if it was drafted by you or Joe or a combination, that we got back in here that, where our policy was reworded or suggested wording, and in that it said, which was endorsed by either you or Joe or whoever did it, that in the event there are revisions in the plat that require that the utility has to go back and re-engineer something or do extra work, that cost would be reimbursable. I don't see what the difference is really in securing for the ratepayers reimbursement on the front end for work when you're willing to provide reimbursement during the project for additional work.
You are now in a completely different circumstance once the project is going versus trying to decide if you want to do the project.
I understand the status is different, but I don't understand that the principle is any different.
Principle is, if I don't want to go out, whatever that number is, and throw $3,000 or $4,000 while I'm just on fax switching distribution.
And it's your position that the utility should pay that then? I mean, that's really what you're saying.
Yes, I do,
Okay.
because I believe that it is a sales point to it.
And that'll be what these people have to decide ultimately, if they want us to, as a public utility, to speculate with you and to wager the ratepayers' money. That's their call. Historically, we have never done that.
Just because we have never done that doesn't mean that that's not what we should be doing, or that's not what other people do. Again,
I didn't say that.
if you're trying to do things to encourage people to come in, if you're trying to get subdivisions built, then that seems like a reasonable cost of business to do that.
My concern, Mr. Chairman, is he's a developer, and we know that. But everybody that's got a field, if we start doing stuff for free, everybody that's got a field all of a sudden is a prospective developer. And you're hanging yourself out there if you start saying we're gonna do services for free. That's my concern.
Well, I think we'd use judgment. I mean, business people use
You
judgment.
better be careful about discrimination when you jump out into that field.
They're also, and we would have to check on this, Charles, for you, if this was the appetite of where we're headed, but we absolutely, to use JD's words, know for an absolute fact that there are very clear statutory limitations on what a public utility can give for free, even to an arm of the city, even to the city. That's governed by the state comptroller's office. Now, whether we could knowingly, by policy, give them money, without charging for reimbursement, that's a
That's what we
whole
need to
nother
see.
story.
Yeah, if there are other utilities that are providing that service.
Of course, we can't answer to that, I mean, we can't help what the others do or not. We can only,
We can learn from what they do. I mean, we can see what they do and make judgments.
right, but if we find through opinion that it is legal or illegal, it is or it isn't.
Right. Yeah, if it's illegal, you can't do it. I mean,
Right.
there's no question about that.
That was my point. And I don't know, and I don't think anybody in this room knows, but we do know that there's precedent for certain things that you can't do, even menial. I mean, hanging Christmas lights. We used to hang Christmas lights for years and years and years and years and years. And it was such a big deal to the state comptroller's office, they put out a DVD, sent it to all the we still have it if you'd like to watch it. And the title of this thing was "Free is a four-letter word." And the point of it was, you can't, just because the mayor or somebody calls and says, send a cherry picker down here to untangle the flag and get the cat out of the tree and help us erect a Christmas tree. Although they're really nice things for the community, it's not the prerogative of the utility to opt to do that.
If we could say to JD or Duncan or whoever else comes in here, statute does not allow us to do that. If we do that work for you, we have to charge you. Then that's, to me, a very good answer.
And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm saying there is precedent in very similar areas.
I mean, if that's a true state of facts, we'd still need to find out why other companies can
Do
do
it,
it.
yeah.
What's the difference in that? A question, is this a showstopper to you?
This one is not a showstopper. It was just brought up because it was something, this was, I know a lot of you all know Joe. And the one thing I love about him is he truly loves this community. And he wants to see growth, and he wants to see development. This is not going to make or break this subdivision, whether we do. But this is something that is out of the norm for every other utility company that we deal with.
Okay, we should take that and we should investigate, we should find
And
out.
if we do some sort of checking with other utility companies, I would really like to understand what Dudley said about, how do you weed out the guy that just got up this morning and decided he wanted to get us 80 hours worth of work and has no thoughts about really building anything? How do we weed through that?
You tell him no.
Yeah.
And tell JD yes.
Well, you tell them, you give them the WAG first of all, right?
Free,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, they'll get a free
So
one.
they must have to do something with that in order to come back and want a more detailed work.
Then the decision will
Yeah.
come back up.
Yeah, then when you see what they come back with, and you see, if it's again, and business people will have to make decisions, is this guy really serious, or is this a fly-by-night thing? And maybe in a utility, you can't make those kind of decisions the way you can in the free market.
It's different. You better be careful. You're treading on
Yeah.
thin ice if
Yeah.
you say, yes, we'll do that for him, but no, we're not gonna do it
Yeah,
for.
because we think this guy will really do it, but we don't
We
think
don't
this
believe
guy
you,
will.
right.
Yeah.
Our action plan is to try to get a determination from the state whether or not, and/or TVA, whether or not providing free engineering services to developers is legal or not. That's what I understand, Dudley, you making a note?
Well, now, if he goes ahead and builds it, you say it is free.
That-
It's built in as part of the cost.
It's part of the cost. So we're recovering our cost. This is only stranded cost. You see, if it's stranded because nothing is done, then it becomes stranded cost. If it is as part of the development, then it is a natural part of the total cost of the project.
The other aspect of that is Mr. Combs wanted to know why the other utilities are doing it. Is that worth our pursuit, or is that outside of our basket?
I think first we do legal. I am so tired of, I have spent 1,000 hours, it seems to me, on tracking every loophole. I can now go to work for LCUB. I know their policies better than they do, so there are, as Nancy would say, variations of the theme in music, that everyone seems to be doing something a little bit different. LCUB takes money up front for transformers, then gives you that same money back. That's a variation of their theme. We don't do that. We don't charge you up front, so there's nothing to give back. And then we listed in June all of those utilities that had a variation of theme. Johnson City, their variation of theme was, there's just $1,100 a lot, and you never get anything back. That makes it pretty easy. When we ran the cost estimate for Mr. Duncan, it was $8,100 from us, or $18,000 if he lived in Johnson City and did it up there. That's easy, but, so if every utility has a variation, why don't we give rebates back? What a great idea that is, unless you put the fact is that you're gonna have to pay, and we're just gonna give your own money back, then it's not that great of a deal. So to iron all of those things out, I don't have a department to do that, I'll be glad to help on specific things, but to poll all of the utilities all of the time on every aspect of everything that we do is a challenge, but we ought to be able to find out whether it's legal or whether it's not.
And these guys should know what the cost per lot is. I mean,
Boy, that's an elusive. Number
Boy,
two,
you're
if
not
you've
kidding.
read any of those emails,
Yeah, but-
you've been provided how that works. We've come up with a new word in the staff, entanglement.
Right.
Entanglement, because then you have to separate all that and you start putting it together, you can move them around anyway.
What are the facts, and then the premise is, what makes good sense? First of all, it has to make good sense, irrespective of what you do or what anybody else does. Reasonable people will say, that makes good sense why we do that. That's a good idea. All right, if you're ready, I'm gonna give you the last thing.
okay,
I wasn't kidding about that pizza coming, no joke. Further notice. Promote advantages of underground development. Cub should have a preference for underground power to ensure reliability and reduce emergency maintenance. I think that came from Mr. Campbell's suggestion. Well, Cub will accommodate and work with developers in the design of either an overhead or an underground electric utility system. The preference lies with the developer or the customer if they're going to build on their lot, not Cub, as this action would clearly be viewed as discriminatory. We'll help you with facts and information as a developer, the costs associated with it, the pluses associated with it, the minuses associated. At the end of the day, you make up your mind whether you want to go underground or overhead. And we would never show preferential treatment based on the size of development. We can't do that. That would be discriminatory if you're going to develop 2 lots or you're going to develop 150 lots. For as a utility, we're going to give you the same benefits or regulations that we're going to give everybody else. So if a developer is vacillating between underground and overhead, and you say, well, what is it going to cost me if I do it overhead? And what is it going to cost me if I do it underground? That first wag is free, by the way. Then you can make up your mind and you can say, well, what if we do this or what if we do that, or how about the conduit, or all of the factors that you can bring into mind that would help you make an informed decision for your development. I wouldn't come into you and as you come to me and say, hey, we're thinking about a development. I say, hey, make sure it's underground because that is the preferred way to go. That's not something that we'll do. But we will provide you with all good information so you can value and make your own mind up, and this is the way for us to go. We had a developer in several weeks ago that they want to go underground, but their system, because they did bring a plat in, we spent 2 hours with them, and we helped show them where they could come off because we had power poles in and around the back end of what they did. So the customer could actually come off a pole and bring in power underground to their home. So essentially, you know, they would be underground, and there was like 8 poles we could come off of, and that would substantially lower the cost for a full underground service within the subdivision. Oh, they love that idea, all great, everything's good to go. So all of that made good sense because it made good sense to have a little underground and use a little overhead that was going. But we told them, strictly underground, it's gonna cost this. Why not take advantage of these poles that are in proximity to these lots that you can bring underground from the pole to the house? The front end of your subdivision, which there are none, and you don't want utility poles within the subdivision, then you just do underground there. So it made good sense, and we offered that as alternatives for cost-saving benefits. They appreciate it, they're gonna incorporate that, and it works. So
I don't think anybody would have any issue with what you said. It's up to the developer.
it is.
I think Campbell must have gotten the impression that CUB discouraged underground.
Well, I tell you,
He got a lot of
gonna
impressions,
say,
Charles.
Maybe he just has the perception that we're hard to work with.
Or something, yeah.
maybe he does.
But
And, you know, we acknowledge, I do, that perception is real. If I could wave a wand and fix it, I would, but I would submit to you that, while we might not be lily white in it, a lot of it is just misinformation that gets passed around.
Let me add one thing there too. Mr. Campbell has never discussed any development with me. He's never been in the office. He's never called me. He's never asked any questions.
well,
So,
we don't want to just shoot the messenger. We want to, deal with the issues that he brought up.
Sure, and that's exactly what we're doing, but I'm saying these could have been dealt with without this protracted effort here.
Well, I don't know if they could, because, been several years trying to find some way to get more residential development done, and nobody's come up with a way to do it yet, so I think maybe
Well,
something
I
like
think
this.
it's unfair to lay that all at the,
It's not,
at the
not
feet
on
of
us, I'm
Cub,
just
yeah.
saying.
Okay.
Just changing Bob Campbell's perception doesn't change the developer community's perception.
Sure.
So
And
just
I
talking to
agree with
him is not.
Well,
solid.
yeah, and we need to be, and I agree, and I have already told you more than once that there is this, we would be foolish not to recognize the fact that there is some bad blood out there from some developers. But if it took bringing some other developers in that have positive experiences that we don't hear from, we can do that too. So I'm just saying that there's a lot of developers that do a lot of development that have no problems with us at all, and they have gotten in heated discussions with some of the developers that were here the other night because they disagreed with that perception. So I'm not going to say everybody who develops out there thinks that we're hard to get along with. I mean, I'm not, I won't, no, I don't support that at all. I reject that as a matter of fact. But I do recognize and do agree that we need to do a better job of reaching out to those that do sense that we are difficult to get along with, and we need to incorporate a better messaging and a better identification and more clarification, whatever it takes, and a good reception, of happy, how can I help you people, as we do when they come in. I have people make eye contact with everybody that walks into the door, so you're not interrupting them when you go to the counter. That's part of the perception of how we care about you as a customer. If you come in to pay your bill and you hit those double doors, somebody along that line looks up and acknowledges that you're there. That's about how you treat people that come in the door. And a developer comes in the door, if they come in and go, oh God, this is going to be the worst experience of my life, we need to do a better job of how are you doing? Let's sit down and how can we save you money and how can we make this project work? That's what I'm going to be doing.
And the first thing is to get some of the big, larger developers to come in. Because, we may, and I'm sure we do have.
Charles, there's a lot
out there.
going on right now. I mean, how many units was that guy that came in and talked to you about?
This morning was talking 400 to 600.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like this is the last bus, out of Tijuana. We're just saying that these guys, that these guys are coming in. These guys are coming, and we do have the developers that are going to develop. It's as JD said, this could be a very hot place. We believe it is. It's not Hardin Valley because they've got a different set of group over there. I mean, they're just like Dollywood, just like there's property in Virginia Beach where my family is. It's hot too. We just don't have a big call for expansion on Foley Hill. It's just not happening. But it is up the 4-lane, and that's where the hot places are. And there's some off of 25W, and that's where the hot places are. And we're going to see that. There are people that are currently developing on the 4-lane. There are people that are going to develop on the 4-lane, irrespective of this project here, that are going to go ahead. We want this project. We want everything about it. Of course, we've loved Joe and what he's done for our community a long time. And at the end of the day, we want to do all we can to help. That's assuming the pizza's at the front. I'm just shutting that right off. I love this. I can do that from my watch. That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman, unless you've got additional questions, because we're now fully prepared to answer anything.
Are there any other issues? There's some things that we don't have time to get into, that have to do with what happens outside the development on the infrastructure side or inside the development and the cost and the reimbursements, how those work. Are there any issues that haven't been brought up that you would see as a showstopper for your project?
Other than those two that you just mentioned, no. You know, we've clarified what the easements are gonna be, whether we can have a one-car garage or two-car garage, that's done, that's off the table. No reason to talk about it anymore. We've talked about the pumps, which we're not even currently looking at being on CB system, so that's good. I think across the board, other than the infrastructure now, to get there and then some kind of reimbursement. So, are you going, I'd love to talk about it, or I can say what our feeling is.
Why don't you say what your feeling is, and then we'll see how that strikes the folks here.
From a developer standpoint, we feel as if we're paying to upgrade CUB system. We are basically, and this is getting the power to the property line. We feel as if we're bringing CUB customers, but in addition to bringing those customers in, we're being paid, we're having to pay to upgrade the system. That's the first standpoint. This is, no one else has ever asked us to do this.
Would you accept one modification of that statement and substitute, instead of upgrade, extend the system?
No, it's an upgraded system.
Okay. I would submit it's an extension, but go ahead.
Either way, I mean, the question is, should CUB be in charge of, be responsible for planning, building, maintaining the infrastructure? Or should, when somebody new wants to come on, should we require them to build the infrastructure to support them? See, in my life and the other utility that I work for, the infrastructure belonged to the utility. The utility did it. They guessed or knew where new requirements were going to go, where there was going to be growth, where there was, you know, new technologies coming in, and that was part of their planning and their work to make sure that they could handle it.
Tell me, Charles, if in that life, you had a guy on Walnut Ridge, and he built a house up there, and then he wanted the service that your company provided, would they provide him that service?
If their infrastructure was down at the bottom of Walnut Ridge, they would require him to get down to the infrastructure, down to the service.
That's no different than what we're talking about either.
The same thing here.
Not exactly.
It's the same principle, but go ahead. I know where you're headed.
You have electricity going through this property currently. You're telling us that we have to upgrade those lines to our property.
I hate to play semantics, but what we have to do to get to your development is extend an existing line that is already adequate. It doesn't have to be upgraded. It just has to be extended to get to you.
Okay, so there is electricity to this property currently that will not service this development. Are we saying anything different there?
I don't know, are we?
We're saying the same thing?
I think what JD is referring to is there is an old copper line that was built actually by TVA originally. The line is original to about 1930 something. It used to be the only line that came from Norris to Clinton. And even though we've repoled it over the years, that old copper line is the same old, it is one and all.
About that.
And it just happens to be there where he is, but it's not the way we would want operationally to serve.
Why haven't we replaced that? Why haven't we upgraded that
But
through the years?
we have upgraded it in the sense that we've maintained it with new poles. The wire, the copper really doesn't go bad, but it is not it is not appropriate or even in the right place for where he wants, where he would like, and I know Nikki would like, for this not to go across through there. And we talked about a new place for the line to come and then go underground to serve the subdivision. So in order to get there,
We agreed to pay for that, we chose to do that. What we're talking about is getting from the property line back out to the main highway.
we're talking about Miller Road.
Yes.
Yeah. Extending the line, we have a new modern line along Miller Road. Same line that serves Mr. Duncan across the street. That brand-new line is the way that we would like to serve this 150-lot subdivision, because it would bring it the most reliability, and operationally, it's the way to come, because it comes off of the bulk artery that's up and down the 4-lane, not through the country and the fields and all the way TVA did it back in the 40s. So, we're wanting to extend that new line to the property in order to provide the service that you've wanted. Okay.
So, now, we are building a subdivision that is going to have a meter that is hopefully going to have 172 customers.
Right.
And having said that, there is a portion, I haven't seen the breakdown, there has to be a portion of each one of those bills that pays for infrastructure.
Yeah, and we've talked about it, and really in our cost card, there is no portion at all presently in the rates for speculation or development money, growth, what if, get to. It's only operation and maintenance
And replace.
and replacement.
You replace with upgraded stuff though, like all this aerial cable
Sure.
we're putting in?
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't put old
But you don't,
stuff.
do you charge the people that are getting this new upgraded
Any
equipment?
time that someone has a line in front of them that our rates are designed to maintain that line and replace when necessary, we're gonna do that. But when there is a call, because everything's working fine, when there is a call for adding construction or adding infrastructure in order to meet the need of a developer, then as the Walnut Ridge thing, you're gonna have to pay to do that. So you don't put that cost, additional burden on the rest of the ratepayers. You're- It's
To the one who
specific
wants the
because
service.
It provides whatever they, there's a lot in behind me, there was 28 acres in there, and it was 200 and some $1,000. I thought it would be a good investment, but it got away pretty quick. But if that had a street in it and electric in there and water and sewer right up to that lot, all of that property would improve. I expect that the streets that you're gonna put in, the city's not gonna be putting those in for you. You see, that all becomes part of the development because the property is improved. And then the cost for us to extend infrastructure to a specific development for the benefit exclusively of that development, then the cost should be borne by the developer because the profit margin is impacted by the additional cost of the burden to the ratepayer if we didn't do that. So the developer's profit margin increases because they're not spending that money, and the ratepayers then pick up the additional cost of providing that infrastructure. And if we're only talking about a 300-foot extension, what if we were talking about, which is always what we have to talk about, what if we extrapolate that out to half a mile worth of infrastructure? You see, that's why in all the development, and I don't know of utility that does any different, that the developer pays all of the extension cost in order to meet, for the very reason that that you said your utility would have done.
I was
that.
going to clarify with JD to make sure that I heard, correct me if I'm wrong because we're all getting tired, but did you say that you didn't know of any other utility that would charge the developer to extend? I'm sorry, then what did you say when you opened the statement?
Most jurisdictions that we work in right now, a lot of what I do is primarily industrial.
Yeah, that's why it's a big difference.
So there is a difference there. But outside of that, most of the time to get us the infrastructure, we're not charged.
Right.
Let me say this, and because all we are is honest folk, and all we can do is tell the truth, and that we're all trying to get to the same place. I have called everybody, all of the colleagues, any utility you can think of, and I have not found not one single one that extends infrastructure for developments without charging the developer.
That they reimburse quite a few of those repairs. And,
That's different. As you say, that's a different scenario. That's within the subdivision.
Until right now, LCUB is one of those. Now, I'm sure there's caveats where if you say it's 12 miles, that's a different one. LCUB is currently one. Sevier County is one.
LCUB is not one of them unless they just passed it at their last board meeting, because I've got their policy in writing.
Yes, and the gentleman you put me in touch with.
Jeremy.
Jeremy is the same one that said we are taking the policy to our board right now for reimbursement.
So, but that's not their policy right now.
Two subdivisions that I have had a part of in Lenore City, they never charged us anything.
I can't help it if they don't follow their own policy, though. But what's in writing is the developer pays the cost to extend power to the development. And I stand by the statement, I haven't talked to any of my friends, any utilities, any of the Ernies at any of the places that say any different than that.
I can thank you, and let's go outside Tennessee, right? Energy United, I'm doing one with them right now. No charge whatsoever.
Every utility has their own variation on how they work that and how their revenue streams are. In the valley, and the TVA Valley, there's a lot of similarities with the 154 power distributors. We're regulated by TVA. None of us make if they're into their own power production, if they generate, it makes a difference because the load makes a difference. We fight our 20% margin wholesale cost that we've got to live within this line, which is restricted. So, to use Ernie's words, tangle and untangle, to get apples and apples, all of that would have to be untangled. At the end of the day, does it make good sense? At the end of the day, everybody is going to have to make enough to maintain and replace and operate their system, however variations, they want to do that.
And there's really two, for the benefit of the board, there are two basic types of utilities. You have a public utility and you have for an investor-owned utility, and the difference is the investor-owned utilities are in the business to make money, just like I think where you came from. You guys needed profit to, and we work off of nothing but revenue less power cost operating margin. So some are more free as a business to speculate.
Because
And
they're not
others
working
are not.
with ratepayers' money, they're working with investor-owned money.
Yes.
And anything that has anything to do with industry, you got different players at the table. Because then you got the state's gonna be working in there with us, TVA would be working in there, you got the jurisdictions, taxing jurisdictions that are gonna be incentivizing, because the very benefits that our chairman says about Clinton, how our community is enriched and enhanced, that comes through the citizens and the taxpayers, do you see? And their revenue stream comes through the value of the property tax, of the sales tax, of the school average daily attendance. It's a different revenue stream than the restrictions of what we have to and what we work with, we will provide service to the guy up on Walnut Ridge. And after a couple of polls, he's gonna have to pay for some of that. A lot of, historically, we even talked about a minimum bill that years ago, and all in an effort to try to protect the rest of the ratepayers from subsidizing costs associated with serving people that want to get off the grid, so to speak.
I want to go back to one thing you said. Mr. Chairman. You made the statement so that a developer can put more money in his pocket. That was what you said when you talked about getting this.
Profit.
Back. Okay. That's not how this works. We have to make money to be able to do this. Yes, sir. We have to make money, or there's no reason for us to do this. It's not money we're putting back in our pocket. It's so that we can drive these costs down until they can actually be sold and people can afford it.
Let me refresh what I said then, because where I'm saying is there is a cost of extension. Who pays that cost? If the developer pays it, it reduces their profit. If the utility pays it, it is burdened on the cost of the ratepayer. So where does that money come from? It doesn't come out of the air. It either comes from the ratepayers or it comes from the developer. If the developer pays it, it diminishes his margin on that. That's the point I was
So the 179, hopefully, homes that we're gonna have out here, those 179 homes, don't bring any profit to the CUP.
They bring enough margin in order to maintain the system, the underground system that we have, that we would put out there, to maintain it and to operate it, and to make sure when there's a power outage or a failure from when they try to shove that primary through that bad conduit, we're gonna have to be out there fixing that stuff, and that pays for that. That is the cost factors that we use only it could be 8 to 15 years before we're going to be in a plus position on margin, which is power at the delta between our power cost and our margin, before we start recovering from that. It could be that long on an average of $100 a month.
It discourages development and turns developers away because you want us to board that cost, which you just said in 15 years from now, you will have recouped it.
That's without maintaining, assuming that there's no cost between now and 15 years. What there will be, do you see?
That meter is gonna be out there for longer than 15 years.
That's speculative. And that's what we get down to. Great ideas. We've got people that retired from here, went in the development business. He got 8 lots or whatever that was, got 4 of them filled, and it's only been, 9 years since he retired.
Better than that.
Yeah, I mean, so, but there are poles out there in his subdivision that he paid for, and as long as there's nobody there, no ratepayer has borne any cost associated with that development. And that's what we protect.
You know, I think we have presented an option that would help protect CUP. It would ultimately protect CUP, but it would also give us the ability that once a new meter came on, to try to recoup some of our costs. And I think any developer, I think that would bring, because ultimately.
LCUB.
Yes.
Well, I'm not opposed to looking at that, because for the life of me, I can't understand how a developer would prefer that over what we do. But I mean, I can be fooled because in their costs, what they do, and their rebates, what they do, is they add the cost of the transformers in, and then they rebate that back over time. So essentially, where we would charge you X, they're gonna charge you X plus the transformers, and that's what they're gonna rebate you. But there would be that term rebate in that whole scenario. I mean, there'd be an actual rebate associated with that, and if that's
It would look good, like on a marketing thing.
I'm
Rebates.
open to that, to follow that same procedure that some do, that do charge a greater upfront cost. I would think a developer would like the least possible upfront cost.
Then let's go, how about we go with the Johnson City one, just make it flat 1,100 across the board.
Where when we did our study with Mr. Duncan, his lots were $440 a lot to serve.
Ours are 13, what were they?
His overhead.
Yeah, but
You're under.
what I'm saying is, Johnson City's is $1,100, not $440.
Ours is at 440 each.
Sir?
Ours is at 440 each.
And you're in underground, and he's in overhead. I mean, that's the difference. Do you see? I mean, you're no more than our actual cost of providing that infrastructure out there, which, again, every utility that I know, I can say yes for certain, it does the same thing. Charges the developer 100% of the total cost. Some include transformers, some don't. We don't, some do. And those that do provide the rebate. Those that don't provide no rebate.
Alcoa, have you all talked to them? Because I don't think that's the case there. And they provide a rebate, it's a staggered program back.
We spent 2 weeks trying to untangle LCUB. We haven't got into Alcoa yet,
You
buddy.
know, that's the, you know,
And we can go through every individual one of these. What I'm here trying to say is, this is a way to promote growth. This helps us bring down these lot costs to make this subdivision work. And we're not just because of who we are. This is something that every intelligent developer is going to look at. And I just
Hypothetically, if we captured the money up front and rebated it back, like some of our sisters over here, so we could put in our messaging for the clicks that we do rebates, even if that, and I'm asking you this as seriously, even if that didn't add a penny to your pocket, do you think that would help us promote development?
No, I don't, because an intelligent developer is finally gonna get to the bottom.
right. That's what we think too.
Okay, but the problem is, if you could offer an incentive up on this, it is going to promote development. It is going to bring more people here. It is going to put more people out there. It's going to put more people on your system. And again, back to the putting in the infrastructure that the developer would have to board the sole cost for it is unreal, because you all are making a profit. This is I know it's still a utility company, it's a for-profit business. If you weren't making some money to be able to operate this system, you wouldn't be in this business. So there's money coming in off of these rates. And from, how do I put this? When we go out here and we look at this, I'm gonna bring this up, I think I've mentioned this already. If I go as a individual and I buy 15 lots through this county, and we put a house on every one of those 15 lots, and I get a meter, and we've got that up and running, and we're paying the bill on it, you all are gonna pay up to $2,500 to get to the service to each one of those houses. Is that correct?
No. No.
That's a discussion for another day, buddy.
It is,
'cause
I know.
these people are wore out, and that would, even if I had to start talking, I couldn't cover it in 30 minutes.
No, that's incorrect. It really is. And
Policy says.
No,
no,
it's part of that's more entanglement.
yeah. There's a difference between a development and a home builder, single residence home builder where the infrastructure is already there. What does it take to serve him? We'll do a span to get to him. Do you say?
Up to $2,500.
25, if we're going up Walter's Ridge, it's gonna be more.
But you're gonna pay up to.
No, we're not gonna pay anything. It's an allowance
Cover the cost of up to $2,500.
for infrastructure that's already there, which is infrastructure that you wanna pay, you don't wanna pay even to get to. Do you see? That line's already there. We got a pole, we got primary out in front of him. He lives back there, takes a lift pole to get to him. We're gonna serve you there. And that's different than nothing is there anywhere, do you see? You put the infrastructure in, and you come back in 3 years and you build off that lot, and I won't charge you anything to serve you. You see, that's a difference between the builder and the developer of the subdivision, and that I can give you a full presentation on, because that is a little complex. I prepared everything that we discussed, Charles.
Yeah, I didn't think we could get to that today.
Anything past that, you know, I can do a preparation for you and not be shooting from the hip.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't think we could get to that today because that,
Why? It's only
I could
quarter
see-
to 9.
I could see too many variations just in the stuff that I had to read to be able to understand.
You have to commend Joe. He has trained him well, has he not?
Joe is an outstanding developer. He is successful. He is legendary in industry for doing industrial sites. He does really, really well. Obviously, he's started here in Clinton with the get and goes and the apartments that still he maintains, I think, to an excellent level.
Immaculate.
That's right, that's right. So, I mean, all of that's good, and we continuously want to support him in his, any endeavor that he has in our community, because at the end of the day, you know, our community's gonna benefit. That's the bottom line.
We're cheering you on, buddy.
I think the intent is to promote development and growth. And Joe has been very specific, he doesn't want this about him. He has just seen the opportunity to promote developers across the, because certain things like the E1 pumps that we've sitting here and talked about, I was actually very surprised nobody else showed up for this. Like I've got 6 people or 7 people in front of me.
Well, you hope you don't feel that way, because I think you've provided invaluable feedback, and in a very positive way, and I hope you feel that's been accepted in a very positive way. Because I think we have dual goals, but our primary is, for us, is to make sure we're doing everything we know to do, protecting our ratepayers and supporting development,
Absolutely.
you know, but in that order.
Is there anything, what kind of message are you going to go back to Joe or Nikki with?
Bring it back to that, I think, for the most part, a lot of our concerns that we've seen, that we had, have been addressed. The easements have been addressed. The, you know, the fears of having to use ductile iron that someone told us once upon a time have been addressed. Across the board, everything is addressed, and I don't really see any issues with the first part. Now, I think we're going to come to an impasse because this still dictates our final, this is what we can do on the infrastructure to it. And if there is a way to recoup some of our cost once a meter was set in place and was brought online. And I think that's where the, you know, we'd like to have a discussion.
And we will have to, because that's, none of us have learned.
Greg and I talked about one-on-one for an hour the other day about that.
Yes, sir.
And I still tell you, I don't understand all the tentacles on that monster. It's gonna take some discussion to make us all more intelligent about that.
Okay, well, we appreciate you coming in.
I'm sorry, I didn't got to.
No, I mean, this is.
We were told you were buying us a steak dinner.
Can I give you my credit card? I gotta go to North Carolina.
No, we have an opportunity coming out here. We said that we would get back to all of the people who came to the workshop. And I think that we have an opportunity to start on our PR campaign by giving them a positive feedback from what has come, what we've been able to do as a result of all of the comments they had coming in. And that will be our job to come up with something. I know Greg probably is the person who needs to
Take some time off? Yes.
to do it, but Greg tends to be in more detail than probably we want to have going back out. So I think your knowledge and your assessment of all of the situations, and then boil it down to something that people out there can understand and appreciate will be the next step in it. Is there anything else from any of the people here? Steve?
When we're through the agenda, I have one thing I want to say that maybe it's a positive note that'll help in the meeting.
Well, we all have one thing to do after we finish. You have anything else, Penny?
I just want to say, JD, I appreciate you coming out tonight. I think that we all have a lot to think about. While it has been extremely long and exhausting, I think it's given us something to think about with development. There's been some things that have been discussed that I don't know how I feel about, honestly. And, you know, what you
I'm
just
with you,
said
too.
about Greg tends to be very detailed. And I made the statement earlier, I don't ever want to appear like I'm sugarcoating something because I'm not that person. But I do think that sometimes, and I've not been on the website to look at the actual, read through the verbiage of the development, but I think sometimes we give too much information and that gets confusing to developers such as yourself. But I do appreciate you coming out and just reiterating again the need that we have. And for our team, for listening and explaining what you have tonight. I'm exhausted. It's been a long week for me, and coming here, I'm just like, whew. But we have a lot to talk about, and I think everybody here wants to see Clinton grow. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Okay, very quickly, I just want the record to show that we are listening. Charles, you had the idea for a listening session, which was a good idea, and we listened. And there were a lot of our developers that came in, and they're good people, and we're all trying to reach the same spot, with residential growth. And I hope that people appreciate CUB for the great utility that it is. It is a great utility. And we do have developers that are happily developing, but we have a perception out there that's been brought to our attention, and I think we have agreed to work on that as a board and as a utility tonight. So we're hearing people, we're hearing, we're listening, and we're making moves to be different. But I don't want us to lose the concept of we're doing great things as a service to our community, and I don't want us to lose that. And we've got a good leadership team that's making a lot of good things happen, and a lot of good employees that are supporting all that. If we do have a good utility, I'd put ours up against anybody's anywhere, but we're listening. We're doing our best to make the negative perception go away to a positive
I will
perception.
tell you this, this is the first one of these I've ever been to. And like I said, I go to a lot of jurisdictions, so you all are to be commended on this, just having the workshop and then the follow-up that you went through. Because I think this has made it farther than pretty much any, a lot of people look at utility companies as monopolies, that it's my way or the highway, nobody's gonna talk to me. I think what you all have done here will go farther out in the community. And I think you need to sell it to everybody that's out there.
Well, thank you. Steve, do you have more business to
Greg,
bring up?
don't let your blood pressure go up quickly when I say this, because it'll help at the end, but, you probably know Kathy Brown.
I do.
Normally when Kathy calls me lately, its first words are, "I'm mad." But she called me yesterday and said she was happy that she complimented CUB on fixing a whole handful of issues that she had been dealing with you guys with over the last few weeks.
Great.
And she was very complimentary.
That's great. Shock.
Did you have any new business, Greg?
I did, I had two other issues. I wanted to tell you, which now I'm going to shorten what I was gonna tell you about our ARC grant and what I see coming up. We did the preliminary, and I'll wait until you're invited to do a more comprehensive application, and I'll go through. It's significant and substantial. This is what I'm dealing with in terms of that grant, but that can wait. And I would like to give my friend here, our Assistant General Manager, an opportunity to ask for an opportunity to make a.
Yeah, that was the last item that we were going to do.
I'll make this brief, and this was written way before tonight, so don't think that this has anything to do with tonight. But if it's okay, I'll just read through this so I can get through it, okay? After much careful thought and prayers, Laura and I have determined that it is time for me to announce my intent to retire from CUB. This decision has not come easy by any means. However, after a very successful and rewarding career here at CUB, spanning now over 32 years, the timing finally seems right. My last day as your Assistant General Manager and Director of Engineering and Operations will be January 11, 2019. Please know that this announcement has been forthcoming for some time, having been postponed only due to my long-standing commitment to my dearest friend Greg, the mutual respect and adoration I share with staff and employees, and the professional duty I have felt to this board. In the spirit of full disclosure, I would be less than genuine to submit that recent events have not added stress or otherwise been a consideration. No one single event or happening has led me to this decision. Only after carefully considering what else I may like to do in life and being sensitive to my family and personal health did I arrive at this point. Please know of my sincere, heartfelt gratitude for your trust and confidence in my leadership abilities. Your endorsement of the many proposals aimed at system improvements, new technology platforms, broad safety enhancements, and numerous other recommendations over the years serve as clear evidence of your support. No engineering professional could ask for more. Thank you for the opportunity to have served the citizens of our community and surrounding areas for so many years. If I can be of further assistance to CUB in the future, I would welcome the opportunity. I wish each of you and your families nothing but the very best. Thank you.
Well, we all will miss you. We hate to see you go. I know I personally like Ernie a lot. We tailgate with the same mutual buddy, friend, and I've always said, and I will always say, that he has been the glue that kind of holds everything together here. He's accomplished in every area that I work with him on. So,
Thank you, Charles.
we appreciate it. Anybody else who wants to comment can? I know we all hate to see Ernie go. We miss him and we wish him the best.
I think your footprint and handprint here, Ernie, at CUB will be your legacy that you leave here. We'll miss you. Appreciate all you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Staying in the area?